invited our former planning director, Jennifer Collins, who now works for the North Carolina Department of Transportation, to come back, visit us, and give us an update on road constructions that are going on in and around our particular area. Good evening, Mr. Collins. Good afternoon, Ms. Collins.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for having me today. I apologize in advance to a couple on the council there. The presentation you received today will be similar to what was received or presented at the Goldsboro MPO Transportation Advisory Committee meeting on February the 10th. The department gave an update at that meeting with regards to our current funding issues and the development of the next STIP, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is our 10-year plan of transportation projects and how we move them forward and fund over a 10-year period. But so today is just simply, I've got a three-phase presentation to give you. I'll begin with kind of some current projects within Goldsboro MPO, or the Goldsboro-Wayne County area, and the status of those projects. Then I'll move into the development of the STIP that I've just discussed with regards to the next STIP for our next 10 years. And then I'm going to tie that into projects that are beyond Goldsboro MPO and how their timing, their schedules, the importance of those projects, mainly on an interstate level, that is important to Goldsboro and how Goldsboro's growth may improve with those infrastructure improvements. So currently, Division 4 is the division in NCDOT that I work for, and within Division 4, Wayne County falls within that division. Currently, as you all know, if you've ridden around, William Street is currently under construction, and Phase 1 is expected to be completed early this spring with the start of Phase 2, and then that will include a major traffic shift. So currently, we're about 50% complete, and the completion date is roughly or estimated around October of 2023. Another project, the next couple of projects we anticipate letting this spring, that is Hood Swamp realignment at Berkeley, or US 13. Originally, we had an overall project that included this realignment. We were also going to be widening Berkeley, but that project has since been delayed due to our current funding status. But due to some potential development within that area at Hood Swamp and 13, it was needed with regards to the realignment. So part of the upcoming 13 widening project will go ahead and realign this intersection, and we anticipate letting this project in April of 2022. We also have the much-needed Wayne Memorial bulb outs that everyone has obviously realized was a need when the concrete median went in. So we'll accommodate U-turns at Lock Haven Drive and Country Day Road. We are waiting on one right-of-way agreement to be signed so we can move with utilities. There is one that will most likely have to go in condemnation, but we can still move forward with our part, and we estimate letting that in April of 2022 as well. Probably the most popular project in Goldsboro that many of us have been talking about since prior to me coming to Goldsboro, I think my understanding was probably 2004, is the realignment of Central Heights Road with Berkeley Boulevard. We have finally finished right-of-way with that project acquisition. I know you're seeing utilities being moved out there, and we are on schedule with that project, and construction will let in November of this year. And another big one you'll see, we have a pre-construction meeting this week regarding the pavement rehab on US 117, and that's from US 70 to Duplin County. So we are working with the contractor pre-construction meeting this week. We will ensure that we coordinate with some utility work that's going on there. The last thing we want to do is resurface and then see that pavement broken up or torn up due to some utility work. And we'll also make sure we coordinate that with the fair traffic so that we're not going to have any issues with repaving while the fair is in town. This is, again, these are the projects I just discussed. This is some work that took place on North William Street. Just to recap, the contract amount was $15 million. We awarded it in March of 2020. You all know J. Smith Civil was on site there, and again, 50% complete. And these were just the public maps that were shown. We all know it's it's being divided, so you'll have 4 lanes with a median. So it brings me to my next topic, which is the development of the STIP that we are currently working on now as a department. We are currently taking projects that are in our current program, breaking them out so that we can develop the next STIP, which is the 10-year document. NCDOT has had a funding model since 2013, and we refer to that as the STI, which is the Strategic Transportation Investment Law, within the overall goal to have a 10-year plan with projects scored based on data. All projects within the 10-year plan are not guaranteed to be funded. Recently, we updated cost estimates for all projects. Due to increases in material, labor cost, right-of-way, and other construction costs or materials, our current STIP is severely overprogrammed. You can see here, before any federal grants that's come our way, you can see that the department, and this is statewide, from statewide projects is roughly overprogrammed $4.7 billion. In a regional level, this is where the state's broken up into regions, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then there's certain divisions within those regions. But from our regional tier bucket, we are overprogrammed $4.8 billion. And in the division needs category, this is each division within the Department of Transportation across the state. We are roughly $2.1 billion over programmed. This slide, obviously very same as the previous slide, but this was after our federal stimulus come our way. A lot of people were thinking, hey, DOT is getting a lot of money. This is going to get us out of the deficit we're in, and all projects are going to stay on schedule. All projects are going to be funded. That is a big no-no. That is not the case. The federal stimulus money was about a 20% increase in funding for DOT, but is insufficient to cover the entire deficit. So you can see it didn't change that overprogramming by much. In the statewide category, we're 3.3 over. In regional, 3.9 billion over. In the division, 765 million. So this has all led to the Board of Transportation working real close with some DOT work groups to develop our next STIP. How can we ensure that current projects in the STIP today are funded, and what can we do to make sure that we have money to program new projects within our next round of, we refer to that as prioritization, for projects that are scored on a data basis and work their way into the next STIP for future funding. So roughly back in November, the Board of Transportation received the same type of presentation I'm giving you today, and they were charged with several action items. In November, they were asked to what type of STIP development method do we want, and it was agreed to that they wanted the traditional STIP, that's that 10-year program. In December, they were brought back a presentation and asked what kind of methodology do you want to use to put projects, to ensure projects go back into that STIP. So the approach that was approved was the scenario 2 that we refer to, and that is any project that's in the current STIP that had a construction let date of 2026 or before, had grants awarded, or had right-of-way underway. So those projects, we took them from the current STIP and automatically referred to them as delivery projects within this upcoming development of the 2024-2033 STIP. The next decision was we took to them in January, which is why you see that there's a yellow little circle there. We did not have board consensus at that time, was with the remaining money after those delivery projects made it into that document or that 10-year program, we had remaining money. How do we spend that money? What projects compete for that remaining money? So they wanted to see projects. They wanted to see how things fell out. So basically, we were at a standstill at our January meeting, and just this month, we have come to consensus that we will use the P3, P4, P5 approach with a flexibility option on programming the remaining projects to use the remaining money. What that means is we have had several different iterations of SPOT. I refer to it as its prioritization. We have a prioritization 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, currently in 6.0. So what that means is the remaining projects, do they go back to when they were committed originally into the 10-year plan? So if they were committed in P3.0, that project's going to take precedence and basically just we're drawing down money at that point. So they're just going down, following a step approach from P3, P4, P5. This slide shows you the blue lines, basically, when I refer to those delivery projects, anything that had a construction let year prior to 2026, grants were awarded or right-of-way started. They eat up the bucket, the statewide bucket, is 72% of the money within the statewide tier is going to those delivery projects. The green lines indicate the money that's left for projects to compete. So you'll see Division 4, which Wayne County is in, competes in Region A. We roughly have 39% of our budget remaining for projects to compete using that approach, P3, P4, P5 approach for the remaining money, which is roughly $244 million. And then if you look down, Division 4 is Wayne County. We have allocated 42% with those delivery projects, and we roughly have 58% of our money remaining, and that's $308 million. And those are projects within Goldsboro that will compete and hopefully be able to be funded to move forward with in our next step. So this is just telling you the approach I spoke earlier, programming a P3, P4, P5 approach with the flexibility. The flexibility option is you can work with an MPO or division, and if there's a project that actually made it into the STIP, but you feel one of the projects did not make it, we can come back and have conversations with the division and the MPOs on swapping those projects. And there's criteria for a swap. So that flexibility option all depends on it being in the same category and it not being 10% more of the cost of the project that you're swapping out. It sounds easy, but it's not. We really don't see this happening that much across the state just due to project cost. So where the Board of Transportation is currently, what they have not made a decision on is where do we draw that line with regards to what projects have to be reprioritized with the next prioritization. So the work group recommendation is a 5-year line. Currently in the current STIP is a 6-year line. So they're asking for it to go back to a 5-year line. We're hoping to get consensus at that in their March meeting. So what does all this mean to Goldsboro? With regards to the status of the projects that are in the current STIP, in order for them to make it into the delivery of the upcoming STIP, they had to have that construction let date of prior to 2026, current grants awarded to them or under right-of-way. So you can see a list of projects here that we feel are 95% going to make it into the STIP and stay on schedule and move forward with funding. So you have US 13, Berkeley from New Hope to Sawston Road. That has a let date of 2024 with a construction cost of roughly $45 million. We have U3609BA, which is, I just spoke of, the Hood Swamp. That one will continue to move forward. We're moving forward. That's in a delivery status and should be let in April. You have Wayne Memorial Drive from New Hope Road to US 70 Bypass. I know this is an important and growth area for Goldsboro. That one will make it into that delivery status, most likely with a let date of 2025 and a construction cost of $12 million. Again, you see Central Heights Road realignment. That one is staying on schedule and letting in November of this year. The bulb outs letting out on Wayne Memorial Drive, letting in April. And then you also have 2 bike or pedestrian projects that will make it into the STIP and stay on schedule. And that is the Stony Creek Greenway. We're hoping to let that project in April of 2022. Currently, that is going to be a locally administrated project, so Goldsboro will oversee and administer that project. Just if you're familiar with the New Hope multi-use path, it will follow and be administered just as that project was. And then you have a sidewalk on the east side of Berkeley from Ash to Elm Street that will most likely move forward with a construction let date of 2025. Again, I put these maps in so you have them in front of you. Just wanted to reference location for you. We don't have to go through each one. It's just me going back over that list I just discussed. If you have any questions, we can talk afterwards regarding a particular project. So once those delivery projects were already made, we had remaining money. So what do we do with that remaining money? So that's, again, goes back to that P3, P4, P5 approach, and you start with your statewide tier. The projects that are affected not necessarily the Goldsboro MPO, but Wayne County, that will have an impact on Goldsboro, is we had 3 projects that are very important to Goldsboro. They're on the future I-42 corridor, which is currently US 70 between I-40 and Raleigh to Morehead City. You have 2 sections of that bypass that will end where it currently ends on our western end, going to Johnston County. We refer to that as the Princeton bypass, and not necessarily bypassing Princeton, but it's going through Princeton. And then you have to the east, you will have US 70, what we refer to as the Kinston bypass. These 3 projects will have to compete with the remaining 2-point-something billion in the statewide tier. So I can't tell you exactly where they may fall out, but they're competing statewide. So right now, there's a lot of resolutions going around different municipalities, the Highway 70 Corridor Commission, really trying to get some political pushback and support to the Secretary for these projects to be accelerated and move forward. So like I said, this is real key to moving freight, moving people to and from Raleigh to the beach, and Goldsboro being that center point. That is, they're critical to the growth of Goldsboro. This is maps just included in your packet of the projects I just spoke of, the Princeton bypass. This is an interchange. I stuck that in there because you're probably very familiar where the Evergreen Cemetery is, and the Ebenezer Church Road on the western end. There will be a new interchange here, and that's part of the Princeton bypass project. And then this is just the corridor of the Kinston bypass. So once the statewide tier is, I guess, more or less bottomed out to 0, you move to your regional impact projects. That is where we compete with Division 1. They're to the north of us. So Division 1 and 4 fall in Region A, and we have $244 million remaining in that bucket. A project in this area that is critical to growth for Goldsboro is U4407. That's the Ash Street extension from Berkeley to 70. We, at the last MPO meeting, we did get a consensus of the TAC to reduce that scope. Originally, today, if you looked at plans that were shared in the public map, it showed 3 roundabouts. We are reducing that to just having 2. You will have a roundabout at Oak Forest Road, and then further east, we will realign and have a roundabout that will connect to 70 and align with future drives or access to the industrial park. That is the goal of that project. And we will move forward with redesigning right now of that area, and we'll come back out to the public regarding that project, because more or less it is the top project within the region that will move forward with funding. Projects that are subject to reprioritization or swaps that fall within this regional impact that did not before they could make it in, that $244 million was spent with other projects based on that P3, P4, P5 approach. So you have the US 70 at North Oak Forest Road intersection improvements, and then obviously future I-795. That project is just a huge bear, has a huge price tag. We have to break it up into sections in order for it to compete well against other projects within North Carolina. But those projects fail within that regional tier and will be subject to reprioritization as we move forward. And again, this is the Ash Street project, the extension that we were referring to, but we are working, now that we got consensus, we will submit a revised cost estimate to our STIP unit, and it will more than likely free up some money within that regional tier, which may allow us to move that project at Oak Forest Road and 70 intersection improvement into a funded project. And then finally, you have your division needs bucket. Division 4 is sitting pretty in this bucket. We have 58% of our funds left, roughly $308 million. And after we went through all of our Division 4 projects, we actually have about $223 million available. So what that means is we will go to non-committed projects that were tossed early on in the beginning with as far as developing of the STIP, and we'll be able to pull some non-committed projects in to compete for the remaining $223 in our budget, or $1 million in our budget. But for Goldsboro projects that will make it through is US 13 from Sawston Road to Greene County. We're looking at adding turn lanes for that section of road. And then, as a reminder, division needs includes your bike and ped, your aviation, your transit projects. And for Wayne County, there was a project for the jetport for an extension of a runway that made it into the division needs category. But as you see that second or that third bullet, there are no projects that are subject to reprioritization. At this point, we're just looking for non-committed projects, and we'll work through that same approach. They are just going to be looked at as from their most recent spot score, which was P5.0. And that is these projects that are listed here with regards to Goldsboro or Wayne County. These are the projects that were considered non-committed in the current STIP and were originally tossed and not even up for consideration. They would have had to be reprioritized. But since Division 4 has remaining money, we will look at how these projects scored in P5.0 and basically from a priority standpoint, highest score to lowest. And as we subtract that $200 million remaining, and hopefully some of these projects will make it back into the STIP for future construction and funding. So our next steps, back at my office, we're working, we're doing homework exercises to see and having talks with MPOs and RPOs on reducing those project scopes the best that we can, so that we can make sure we are getting feasible, cost-efficient, and needed projects into the STIP. We are still waiting for the Board of Transportation to have a final consensus on the time frame of the STIP for those projects that will be subject to reprioritization. And the STIP unit, as well as our spot office, will be holding partner educations in the spring, and public involvement regarding this process. So this probably will not be the last time that you as an MPO or you as a city will hear about this process that we're going through. So lastly, I just want to touch on some important projects that we keep focus on within the division or the department that will help with future growth across the state of North Carolina or eastern North Carolina. So again, as I spoke earlier about the future I-42, that's US 70 corridor between I-40 and Raleigh to Moorhead. You have the future I-587, which is your US 64 corridor from the 264 split in Zebulon to Wilson to Greenville. And then you have the future I-87, and that's from Raleigh to Rocky Mount to Williamston to Eden to Elizabeth City to the Virginia line. So these are really important future interstates to move freight to eastern North Carolina. And of course, we don't want to forget I-795, but we are definitely, there's feasibility studies going on with different sections of that corridor, and we will continue as this MPO or this division to reprioritize and do the best we can to kind of reduce those costs, or do the best we can to make them score well for future funding. This is the map that is, you can go to the Highway 70 Corridor Commission and see the alignment of the future I-42 corridor, and that is obviously from Raleigh to Moorhead City. We all know Goldsboro Bypass has been completed. We are really trying to get Kinston Bypass moving forward, and the Princeton Bypass. They are currently doing work in Smithville now. If you've been to Raleigh lately, you will see the upgrade to, near Wilson's Mills in Johnston County. And these are just some current pictures of the work going on there that will bring this section of the corridor up to interstate standards. New interchanges, shoulder work. And then last, from Buffalo Road to Selma, Edwards, that's that last little section. We are working on a feasibility study currently that is real bird's eye view of what that corridor is going to look like for hopes with future funding. Again, this is just a repeat of the map for the Princeton Bypass, the Kinston Bypass. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on, I did mention it earlier, but this is I-795 for Goldsboro. This is a real critical interstate that gets us to 40 in Wilmington, or to head towards Wilmington. Planning and environmental studies of the corridor currently on hold, but will most likely pick up soon. Construction to be done on these segments are just based on funding. We're just going to have to keep playing the game, and hopefully they'll make it into the STIP in the future, because right now they're currently not funded for construction. And I threw this one in here because it is going to be a big impact to Goldsboro. In January of 2023, we hope to let the project of the bridge replacement in front of the bakery. So we are currently coordinating, finalizing those right-of-way plans, and acquisition for right-of-way has begun. You will see some pedestrian improvements with this project. You'll have sidewalk, and then their sidewalk is going to go from the bakery down to George Street as well. So that's going to be an improvement for that area. But we've been working real closely with the bakery and EMS on the detour routes. So all of that is being worked on now, and is on schedule for a construction let date in 2023. And finally, as I indicated, we do have some low-impact bridge replacements that's going to go on and within the area. A lot of resurfacing, roughly 132 miles of roadway improvements will be taking place in Wayne County, and some safety projects, as well as the locally administrative project that I referred to earlier, which is your Stony Creek Greenway. So there's going to be a lot of work going on. Even though it seems like DOT's had some funding issues, things are picking up and moving back and getting back on schedule. With that, any questions for me? That's all I have at this moment.
Jennifer, some people may not know what the MPO is. It includes Goldsboro, Walnut Creek, and Pikeville.
Yes, sir. And portions of Wayne County.
Yeah.
So that's the Metropolitan Planning Organization. In a nutshell, that's the urbanized area. Anything that falls outside that boundary goes into an RPO. So when I say RPO, is a rural planning organization. So that's the other parts of Wayne County, Mount Olive, and they all fall into the Eastern Carolina RPO. So we really coordinate with the RPO and the MPO to make sure on a regional level that our projects are equally important and prioritized.
And the widening of Wayne Memorial and Berkeley was pushed back from 2019, 5 years.
5 years, yes, sir. That's when DOT recognized their funding issues. Cost estimates were just way off. And a lot of projects, majority of the projects were delayed anywhere from 4 to 5 years that are in the current STIP today.
So I invited Jennifer here today to present this overview because even though some of these things, and maybe many of these things, we won't see in the next 3, 4, 5 years, they are part of the overall planning for the Goldsboro area that's going to impact on people having access to and from Goldsboro, living here, businesses coming here, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of us having knowledge about the future. So we plan accordingly for that growth. So Jennifer, thank you for coming here. I'm appreciative of the information you gave us. I'm sure you needed to take a deep breath after that breeze through.
It's a lot of information to take in, but you're not the only one receiving it. The department is sharing it with many others, and it is important to understand. So if there's anything that you do not understand, or we speak in acronyms, I've learned that. I'm still learning everything that DOT refers to different things in the office, but please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll help in any way that I can.
Anyone? Go ahead.
Jennifer, I have a question. How did the airport get into the middle of this mix?
Because, so STI is all modes of transportation. So our jetport falls into the division needs category. So our airport is competing with the highway project. Our highway projects are competing with bike and ped projects. On a regional level, you will have like RDU airport competes with highway projects in a regional level. So all modes of transportation are within this process we go through, and then a certain amount of the budget is allocated to each mode. So for us, those jetport projects, those transit projects, and those sidewalks and greenways, or even if we're just widening a shoulder for a bike lane, those are competing within our division tier bucket amongst highway projects. I think a lot of people just think it's highway, but I mean, yes, highway does get majority of the money. But they do have to also compete on a criteria level and end up with a data score.
Jennifer, on that point with the airport, 5,500 obviously larger planes. Is there a reason? I realize it's down in the weeds, I apologize.
Yeah, and the airport is not my baby.
Okay.
So if you have any questions regarding that, we can reach out to the jetport and understand their priorities and what their goals are with the extension of the roadways, the additional hangars, that sort of thing.
Purely.
I mean, it's obviously growth, but with regards to what their future and what their hope is, I can't speak to that.
Thank you.
And I did just want to mention one final thing that I know coming up on my end that I have been assisting the MPO with is the Ash Street Corridor Plan. We are working on, staff made a recommendation to TAC at their meeting, and it will come before council at your next meeting on March 7th to recommend hiring Kittleson and Associates to perform an Ash Street Corridor study from George Street all the way to Berkeley. And recognizing the project scope change or reduction on that eastern end, Ash Street extension, and so that we can get one entire corridor improvement. But the end goal of that study is to have improvements, recommendations, alternatives designed out of that so that it can be submitted into this authorization process for future. It may result in a road diet. It may, it may have a roundabout. There's all kinds of things, but the consultants needed to dive into that and do the research, existing data, and come up with some alternatives to recommend for approval.
I have one question.
Okay.
In regards to the bus stops and some of the areas where you have road wideners in the inner city, could we utilize some of that funding from DOT to pay for bus canopies? I know
Yes.
they're based off of frequency
That
in
is-
most cases, but can we utilize DOT
Ye-
funds
Yes,
for that?
sir. You can, and that's working with Don Willis in order to come up with a list of projects that he wants to submit for funding, STI. But most of the time, the projects that are getting submitted into STI are more like a fleet. They're a substantial dollar amount.
Yes,
But there are other avenues with 5703, and there's different funding sources that are available to transit that are not to highway. So there's probably a better source of funding for a bus stop versus trying to compete against switching out a fleet or getting an additional bus or van. I mean, it's just probably not going to compete as well with needing the vehicle itself versus the bus stop. But there are avenues for installation of those stops where needed.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate you coming down that long trip from Wilson over here. Have a safe trip back.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the budget items, and who's going to take the lead on it? Goldsboro Fire Department, you're up first? Go.
So I asked some of our bigger department heads to give you a presentation on their FY 22-23 budget concerns.
There we go.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, city manager, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk to you today. I know time is limited, and in the interest of time, this is going to be fairly quick. It's going to be brief, but somewhat direct to give you an idea of what the fire department's looking for in the future. So the Goldsboro Fire Department consists of 84 full-time employees, 3 part-time employees. Those 84 full-time employees further breaks down to 75 operational and 9 staff and administration. Out of that number 9, 2 of those are administrative, 7 are staff. The 3 part-time employees we have are inspection, support services, and training. Training on that one is actually a misnomer. The individual who did that position before was recruitment, retention, fire prevention, training, support services. Ms. Johnson kind of went the gamut and helped wherever she was needed. The next thing is stations. We have 5 stations, 6 apparatus that are frontline, 3 in reserve. The question always comes up, do we need 6 trucks, 5 stations? Absolutely. Fire stations are distributed strategically across the city to ensure that we get coverage based on NFPA and ISO to ensure all citizens are getting the same coverage and we're there within the allotted 4-minute first vehicle response time. So the calls for the 2021 is 2,781 was the overall calls. That's up 22% from 2020. Each one of these in these categories increased anywhere from 15 to 34% from 2020. I project EMS calls are going to increase through the years just based on EMS CAD dispatch, the aging population, and a number of things that's going to cause those to increase. So the next thing I want to talk about is what the fire department concerns are that will be dealing with budgetary support, and that's staffing, salaries, and apparatus. And you'll probably hear that. You've heard it from me, I think, once or twice already this year. Go over it again. If you remember last time I talked to you, we were 6 employees short since December 2021. Since then, I've just received 3 more resignations that are due to leave February 26th. So that leaves 9 employees since December. That leaves us 11 personnel short on the line or operations personnel. We're expecting more to leave due to the fact that neighboring departments are continually hiring. And of our neighboring departments, Goldsboro is on the lower end of starting salaries and other things that go along with that. We're still 2 part-time vacancies and 1 administrative vacancy. I'm currently working on filling that administrative vacancy now and hope to have it done soon. Where do we come up with our numbers for staffing? We don't just make it up. It is industry standard, but more importantly, NFPA 1710. They break hazards down into 3 categories: low, medium, and high. Low hazards are single-family homes up to 2,000 square feet. NFPA says that we should have a minimum of 17 people on a first alarm. This is the call that we run the most of when we deal with structure fires. It also is the one that attributes to 74% of fire fatalities happen in this low hazard category, and that's based on NFPA. So those are very important. The medium hazard, I've got up here 3-story apartments. That's not all it is. It is open air malls, such as the strip malls you see. NFPA says we should have a minimum of 28 on-scene first alarm to these calls. Even fully staffed, our shifts have 25. High hazards, excuse me, there's 3 of those in the city of Goldsboro. The hospital, Waynesboro House, and then the new apartment building, I believe it was the old Wachovia building. Those are considered high hazard, and NFPA says you should have a minimum of 43. I'm not asking to get to that number. We know we're not going to have that. That's what you call a low frequency, high risk. We have mutual aid agreements and understandings, plus our personnel know in the event that this happens that they'll be called back in. So I said all that, and there's a quick description. You wonder, what are 17 people doing on a structure fire? I think Councilman Polak's the only one that's actually been on one. If I'm missing any, I'm sorry. But you see they're broken up. You've got 2 different lines that are going in. That's 6 people right there. Search teams is 2, ventilations is 2. You have to have people to operate the equipment. An incident commander, we have what's called an IRIC. Anytime we have people in the building, we have to have 2 people sitting outside in case they go down to rescue them. So that's just a quick brief. So what happened to staffing, salaries? Up until recently, where the city manager and the council agreed to allow us to increase salaries, employees' salaries were stagnant. They were staying in a position 2-3 years later, they were still making the same amount of money. That's why employees were leaving for higher salaries and pay plans where they could increase in their pay ranges. Goldsboro Fire Department doesn't offer incentive pays for degrees. We offer education reimbursement, but once they get it, there's no incentive to it after that. That's why a pay plan is imperative, especially from my perspective in the fire department, where we add cost of living, merit, or we follow like some of the other departments that surround us in classifications such as where we have firefighter and senior firefighter. they have engineer 1, 2, fire captain 1, 2, so on and so forth. That way the employees know they have somewhere to step and they're not stuck in one spot. Going to the last concern, apparatus. There's a chart up here. This gives you a rundown of the 9 pieces of equipment that we have at Goldsboro Fire Department. And you see what they're identified as, their year, age, mileage. The last one might confuse you is M/hours. It's mileage based on hours. If you've ever messed with or operated around diesel trucks, when a truck idles or operates but it's not going down the road, the engine is actually occurring wear and tear, but it's not shown on the odometer. So if you look at the 2 I highlighted, those are 2 in the capital replacement plan we're trying to replace. Engine 2 has almost 600,000 miles on it, and that's based on the hours, even though it shows 146,000. When the truck goes to a fire and it's sitting there pumping, the truck is still turning. When the ladder's in the air, the motor's still turning. Same thing with engine 7. You see engine 7 is 31 years old. Our average age of our fleet is 16 years old. 4 of them, as you can see, are over 20 years old. One of those 4 is 31 years old. NFPA 1911 says that a fire truck should be retired at 25 years. 15 years front line, then have an upfit, whatever we can to refurbish it, and it goes into reserve for 10 years. The aging apparatus have contributed significantly to maintenance costs. As you know, that we had to go to the city manager and a council to ask for a new motor in one of our trucks. That wasn't something that people did wrong. It's just the age of the truck and the wear and tear that's on it. So this is just a quick slide about what's called a U-curve. So it just kind of tells you what is that optimal economic life of an apparatus. On the left, you can see cost, bottom is time. We all know that a fire truck is not cheap. They're very expensive, in excess of $600,000, and they go up. However, the maintenance costs on them are low. As the vehicle depreciates and time goes on, we need to find that mark where maintenance costs and depreciation meet. That way, the city of Goldsboro can get a better return on investment. If we can turn around and we have the ability to sell one of those at those points, a volunteer department may take that and pay us more, as opposed to the model we're doing now. The apparatus that's 31 years old, no one can use that for a fire truck if they follow NFPA anymore. So you're looking at maybe a farmer buying it or someone to use it to water their fields. Why is life cycling so important? Minimizing the overall fleet cost. All right. I understand that the apparatus is expensive, but our maintenance costs are starting and have been creeping up and costing more and more and more. It maximizes the vehicle availability. Currently, right now, the fire department has 3 frontline vehicles that are broken down and out of service. All 3 of our reserve apparatus are online, being operated now. So we need to make sure that we can keep those frontline trucks up front and working like they're supposed to. It allows the employees to know that they have safe, reliable tools. There have been times in the past where, and it's not specific to Goldsboro, everywhere, a fire truck can break down in the middle of a fire. We want to make sure that our equipment doesn't get to that point. So how do we do life cycling? Through capital improvement plans. It's imperative to the department, the city as a whole, as you all know. Our capital improvement plan was presented by Chief Dixon, I believe a year or 2 ago. I was involved in helping build that when he presented it. And that capital improvement plan will allow us to replace all of our capital items such as facilities, fire trucks, air packs, radio, hose, anything that's a large nature to get us to move forward. So what does the capital improvement plan look like for 3 years? I've adjusted from what Chief Dixon presented originally, not because I didn't believe in it, but because I understand where the city is right now. So there may have to be some modifications. Replacement of engine 2 is immediate. You saw that. That's engine 2. That truck is also currently down and out of service. To have a tank put in it to a cost of $7,000. It has been down, I believe, 2 months, and we're still looking at 12 more weeks before the tank is even built and brought to Goldsboro. So everything is taking longer and longer to do it. The replacement of an administrative response vehicle, I know that the council approved this fiscal year for us to have one, except In 2019, the department lost 2 of our administrative response vehicles due to repairs that exceeded the value of the vehicle. So we're just trying to get caught up from where 2019. A replacement of engine 7, that was the 31-year-old apparatus. We can do that a year out. What that allows us to do is put the new truck in place of engine 5, which is currently 16 years old, make it a reserve apparatus, and then we're closer to what NFPA says we should be with the age of our vehicles. And then Fire Station 3 is, we were pushing that as an immediate, I still believe it is. Again, knowing what I know, we may have to push this out. There are safety concerns. There are concerns that it's incompatible with, females are not able to sleep out there. It's open bay sleeping quarters. So they can sleep there, however, it's going to be very uncomfortable. The other thing is there is not separate restroom facilities. It is one with one shower in it, and that is all. So there is a need, construction that Jennifer just talked about. While they're backing in the station, people are still coming around that corner fairly fast, and our people are having to step off the truck and stop traffic. So it puts them in a very bad spot. So I know I covered a whole lot real quick, but I was trying to save time. Does anybody have any questions?
Chief,
Yes, sir.
I just want you to kind of elaborate 2 areas in the response data. If you could kind of go in detail, I know you said you were giving an explanation when the trucks are in idle, pumping on trucks, but also the EMS section has opened up its doors to shortness of breath and things of that nature. Has it gone back to going on those calls?
Yes, sir.
I know we had stopped at one point, but now I've been told, so now the trucks are actually being used more on the road because now we're responding to different calls than what we're used to. So
Yes, sir.
is that something that's happening?
Yes, sir. So back in 2020, when the pandemic originally started up and got really bad, EMS kind of told us we needed to back off. They didn't need our help. That lasted roughly 2 months. And then they realized, no, we needed to be there. And more so, our people wanted to go out and actually help the citizens to do what they were there to do. So we started building on that. And Councilman Polak's right, there are some more calls that are added based on the computer-aided dispatch, emergency medical dispatch. The dispatchers ask certain questions. Those certain questions, if they ask, like he said, difficulty breathing, certain types of chest pain, certain typically bleeding, that automatically triggers a fire department response. So there are a few more calls. We don't even fall in line with some of our counterparts. We don't respond to some of the EMS call that our counterparts elsewhere respond to. And we're working on that so we can provide more service to the citizens as best we can.
Thank you. And my second area was staffing. As you said, you're going to be down a few more firemen this month. In the area of retention, what do you see as being the biggest thing that, I know salaries, of course, but first I want to commend everybody that's remained loyal to the department and stuck with Goldsboro. And it's unfortunate that we're giving training for other departments to benefit from. But would you foresee anything by the way of a contract or maybe bringing down the prerequisites of EMT and having, entry-level firemen come in and possibly sign a contract that they can work on the EMT to make our pool of applicants, I guess, bigger? And then once they do get hired, have them have a certain amount of years that they're obligated to stay with the city before they're even eligible to leave. Do you foresee anything like that possibly keeping?
As far as a contract, we are currently working on a contract to anybody that comes in to and do like the police department does and tie a value to it. If you're in if we hire you, you're going to work for Goldsboro for 2 years, 3 years, and then if not, you're going to pay the cost of your training back to Goldsboro. We are currently working on that.
Okay.
My concern with lowering the standard is with as short as we are now, it would make it a nightmare currently for the battalion chief to look at his list and say, okay, I've got to have an EMT over here. And if you have someone new that doesn't have that, it becomes a scheduling issue. And then also, are we reducing the level of service to the citizens?
Yes, sir.
But I'll be happy to work with you if you have some other ideas.
And I think
offline.
for the public's knowledge, I think the class of 18, they'll be coming up on their retirement within the next under 5 years. So
Yes, sir.
there's another variable we need to look at as a city. we're already losing employees, and then there's going to be a mass exodus of eligible applicants for retirement within the next, under 8 years, I'm going to say. So that's something that definitely needs to be looked at from a retention standpoint, and anything we can do to assist with keeping our, across the board, not just fire, but, you know, with our city employees looking at things. But I appreciate you for your
Yes, sir.
answers, Chief.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chief.
Any other
Thank you, and I
com-
appreciate your time.
Okay. Okay, we've followed by the police department. Chief?
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, manager.
Hello.
Like Chief Stempy, I'll be brief. Doesn't mean it's not important. I just know that we're under time constraints and we just need to motor on, and then I'll obviously be available after the fact to answer questions. The police department. Seniority list, we kind of start off to let you know kind of where we're structured. I know you always hear from me about our vacancies, but this will just kind of give you an overview of the officers that are in service, kind of what their length of employment with us are. I don't know why this has got a shift on it, but it is. Anyway, 15 or 13% of your department. We've got 108 budgeted sworn positions. Currently, I'm a vacant at 30. I do anticipate bringing on one more probably within the next 3 weeks. An officer that left us about 2 years ago, had 11 years experience with us, is going to return home, and we're very thankful for that. But anyway, officers with over 20 years experience, like I said, you got 15, 13%. Over 10 years, but less than 20 years. Approximately 25% of your department is structured there. Over 5 years, but less than 10 is 14%. Less than 5 years is 17%. And again, currently, 27% of my department are vacancies, which will be a total of 30. So you can kind of see that we're not quite half as far as 10 years or more. I think we're about 38%. And then for less than 5 years, to include my vacancies, if I were to fill in, then almost half of your department has less than 5 years of experience. Kind of the overview of the setup of the department. Chief's office, right below me, is professional development. There's no vacancies in there. The accreditation unit is full. And then we drop down into the vice. Vice is currently one corporal position. That's one vacancy within that unit. Operations, which is the biggest unit within the department, has most of the people. The patrol typically is fully staffed, is at 56, but currently I've got 21 vacant out of those 56 allotted positions. Warrant officer is 2 officers fully staffed. Park police is 1, that's fully staffed as well. Another division within the department is investigations. Currently I have slots for 12 investigators. There's 1 vacancy. Those 12 investigators does include the sergeant of investigation, who will take on a caseload as needed. Crime prevention, which is community police services, that's structured with 3 corporals and 1 sergeant. I currently have 1 vacancy in there, which is a corporal's position. The SROs, as you know from this current school year, we reduced our SRO capabilities down to 1 SRO and then I call it a part-time, it's a full-time employee, but it's kind of our floater SRO that kind of fills in. Still have all intentions of maybe standing that back up again to get back into the SRO, because I think we do a very good job with that, and I think it's very important. CID, or the crime scene unit, is fully staffed with 4. We made a shift from sworn personnel to civilian personnel, so I do have civilian personnel in there that are doing a great job for us there. Support services consist of an intelligence unit, fully staffed at 1, housing unit, which is typically staffed at 5. I've got 2 vacancies there. SEU, or Special Enforcement Unit, fully staffed is 5, which includes a sergeant, got 2 vacancies there. The gang unit's fully staffed at 2. Training office has a captain and a corporal in there that's fully staffed. Recruiting is 1, and then the GPAC coordinator is 1 as well. So that's kind of the overview of how the department's structured and where my vacancies are at. And as you can see, I keep hearing something off to the side. Am I just hearing things? Didn't know if I had a question. Okay. But as you can see, 21 officers on the patrol unit is where a lot of my vacancies is. And also, when I do promotions to fill those corporal positions, it's going to pull from patrol. So if I were to promote 3 more corporals, now I've put 3 more vacancies back on my patrol unit. So we're holding off on doing some promotions at this point. Kind of crime stats, how are we performing with our 30 shortages? I think we're doing well. As you can see, for the last 5 years, we've dropped crime for the last 5 consecutive years, and if we were to go back 6 years, we've dropped it 6 years, but this is just a snapshot at 5 years. Unfortunately, my homicides were up this past year. Rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, those top 4 right there are considered person crimes, and then burglary, larceny, vehicle theft, and arson are property crimes, but as you can see, we're down 13% over previous years. So the officers that we do have are doing a wonderful job for us, and it shows. Kind of where we compare with cities not of our size. When we initially did this years ago to do the comparison, it was just for area municipalities in our area. So the crime in Wayne County or the crime in Goldsboro has a tendency to affect Kinston, Greenville, kind of surrounding areas. So this isn't a comparison for cities our size, it's just cities in our area and what the crime rate is in there. So you can see that typically everybody has just kind of declined over the years, with the exception of Kinston's had a little bit of an uptick. Greenville, about 3-4 years ago, they were down, they popped up a little bit, but now they're trending back down now. Criminal investigations, kind of the overview of how they're set up. 3 investigators out of that unit. That's all they investigate is crimes against persons, and then other three do property crimes. I've got 2 doing financial crimes, which one of my vacancies is in that area. I also have 1 investigator that does the juvenile, missing persons, and sex crimes, and then I've got 1 investigator that's assigned to the ATF task force. Caseload, how these investigators are working. 156 cases are assigned amongst 3 investigators, 188 for 3 property crimes, 106 for 2. A total of 486 felony cases were assigned to 10 investigators in 2021, which is an average of about 48 cases per investigator. That's actually a 17% decrease from 2020. So caseload assignments are dropping down some, and that's due to the crime rate going down. So obviously the caseload assignments and cases that we investigate have a tendency to kind of go down as well. Training, last year we trained over 8,000 hours, actually 854 hours. That's a 14% increase in training that we did the previous year. So we're increasing our training. Kind of the year before we were down. COVID had a lot to do with that. A lot of our training was off-site that we typically would have traveled to, so we weren't able to do that, but we're starting to go back on the upswing again to get our training in. As you can see, some of the training, long-term effects, childhood adversity, rescue task force, science suicide prevention awareness. I've got some others that we did not include on this, just to note. Some additional training, de-escalation training, enhancing community engagement, ethics, and preventing misconduct is some other training that we were involved in last year, and we're going to continue to do that this year. This is always where the money happens for us, is the vehicle inventory. Patrol cars, when we say patrol cars, the ones that are marked up, they got the graphics on them, the light bars on them, those are patrol. I've got currently 60 of those in the fleet. This is kind of a breakdown of the model years of what we have available. We've still got a 2002, 2008, 2009. Got an old fleet. 2016 we did quite well. The council did very well for us, and we appreciate that. We kind of got back on our feet to have more vehicles available to us to get rid of some of the older vehicles, but 2018, 2019, as you can see now, we're starting to drop the numbers down again. It's always our goal to try to replace our vehicles. Take-home cars usually last us about 8 years, and when we went to take-home cars, 11 to 12,000 miles a year on those. When those cars were line cars where one shift would drive one, I get off duty, I hand it off to the next officer, where those cars were on the road 24/7. Those were only lasting about 4 years, 4 or 5 years. So I do think there is a definite benefit, not only for morale and for the officers to have take-home cars, but I think you get a lot more miles and service out of those vehicles. Admin vehicles, these are the unmarked cars. These are the ones that I drive, the investigators drive, my specialized units drive, the ones that aren't marked up. Currently have 39 of those in our fleet. And again, this is kind of the model year of what I've got. It's a little bit more balanced than what patrol is, but the average life of these vehicles, or the average age of them, is 9.5 years. And again, it's just my fear that, 2019 we did well, and now we're just starting to go back. We understand the reasons why we are not buying as many vehicles. We get that. I think right now, I don't know that it's quite as crucial with 30 vacancies. You're probably thinking with that many officers out, you don't need that many cars. Some of that's true, so I do think we've got an opportunity here to kind of let's slow roll a little bit on vehicle replacement and purchases. Don't let it get away from us, but just be kind of mindful of that, as I get staffed back up, I'm going to need the vehicles eventually. Again, this is just kind of the patrol vehicles. We have 39 vehicles that have under 80,000 miles on them, 6 have 80 to 100, 5 have the 100 to 120, and 10 vehicles have over 120. Again, the service life of these take-homes, 8 to 10 years, based on 80 to 100,000 miles, the maintenance on them, and also the availability of parts. And again, take-home cars are averaging about 11,000 miles a year. Some of the options available to us when we do purchase vehicles, or we are trying to get vehicles, the Dodge Durango. Dodge it's kind of the forefront of the cars, these Chargers, that's kind of where we go. Dodge had some issues, the last couple of years with parts and transmission issues to where we got away from the Chargers. But what we've also found out with a lot of the equipment that these officers are carrying, the officers are required to carry more and more equipment. And anytime you put more equipment in a vehicle, the officer has more equipment on them, your vehicle needs to get bigger as well. These Chargers are nice vehicles. They're not quite as expensive. Chargers typically run about 27 grand compared to the SUVs that are around 33 and 34,000. But it's the comfort of the officers and the equipment that they can carry. That's where we're finding we're having a difficult time with as far as equipment being stored in trunks as opposed to the inside of the vehicles. And so this is just some options, when we get back into the purchasing vehicles more consistently. Accreditation, be very brief on that. CALEA, as you know, back in 2020, November of 2020 is when we received our advanced law enforcement accreditation. That was after 3 years of going through the process and revamping all our policies, our general orders, and also standards. I think it's close to 360 standards that we adhere to now. Then in November of 2021, which was our first year of our 4-year cycle for our accreditation, we've successfully completed that recently, and we're currently 6-7 months into our second year of our 4-year accreditation cycle, still collecting proofs, do an annual review of policies and such, completing the annual reporting, calendar year evaluations and analysis, revisions, updates to general orders, and updating our strategic plan as well as our recruiting plan. We also anticipate in the spring, summer of this year of enrolling into the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation, which is kind of an offshoot of CALEA, but it's going to be more North Carolina agencies, smaller agencies that may not have wanted to get into the CALEA, but it's kind of mimicking CALEA, so it's going to be another accreditation process for us. So we'll, hopefully by the summer, maybe late spring, we'll be duly accredited with both entities. And then recently, I think last week is when we hosted our first North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Network business meeting here at the Event Center. I think it was successful, but it's just asking accreditation managers and chiefs from area departments, and it was Eastern North Carolina that came to us and put on kind of a training session for them as well, but that was the first one that we hosted, and we would anticipate doing more of those. So that's kind of the police department snapshot overview. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
I've got one.
Yes, sir.
Several years ago, we got Shot Spotter. Is it still active, and is it working?
It is active and it is working. Typically, that's budget-wise, that's about a 210, I think probably $214,000 is what I think it's going to be this year. But definitely, it is still active, and I think it's been very beneficial for us. And that kind of ties into what I said earlier, having 30 vacancies, but yet we're running the crime rate down. Technology is kind of the force multiplier. If I've got vacancies, I'm going to rely more heavily on technology and trying to find out look at data. And ShotSpotter provides a lot of good, valuable data to us. Not only does it alert us to shots fired if we're not alerted by the public, but it also helps us map where we're having a lot of these incidents. So if I do have staffing concerns and I can't flood the city with officers, then I've got to kind of pick and choose where I need to put my resources, and ShotSpotter kind of gives me a roadmap of where I need to put my resources. So yeah, it's still active, and I think it performs very well for us.
One more question. Day Circle,
Yes.
been a problem? Going to be a problem?
It used to be. It's not quite as much as it has been, in the past.
The
but
last
it's-
murder was there.
What's that?
The last murder was there, wasn't it?
Right, but overall, anyway, go ahead with your question. I'll quit
Well,
interrupting.
Do they have their own security officers there?
They have our officers there. They hire our officers to work off duty. It's the Grand at Day Point that you're speaking of?
Yeah.
Yep. They hire our officers to work off duty out there.
Okay.
Full-time? There's always somebody there?
not full-time, 24/7, 7 days a week. Again, it's where we look to where, when we're having issues out there, you kind of get an overview of what the last 3 or 4 months look like, and if, if you're having more of your activities on the weekends, certain days of the week, evenings, that's where they schedule us to work, so we try to work when we think they're having the most active, or activities out there.
Speak to the camera situation.
The tsunami cameras, I think the tsunami cameras.
Well, we got both, right?
We do have both. The ones I'm most familiar with is tsunami cameras. There's 6 of those. Typically what the tsunamis are for is we'll put them in areas, again, it's looking at the data to tell us where we're having a lot of our problems, so we put tsunamis in those areas. They're not surveilled 24 hours. I don't have an officer sitting in front of a monitor looking at it 24/7, but the tsunamis record 24/7, and then if I have an event there, I can get to that camera, and IT can help us, and they can upload it, and hopefully it's got video. The tsunamis have been very helpful, pairing them up also with the shot spotter. We have had cases where we've had shot spotter alerts, and then we've had a tsunami in the area, and we've pulled the video, and it's showed us what we needed to see. It showed, the shot, the shooting and the incident, stuff like that. So, combining them together, I think works very well for us.
Chief,
Sir.
while you're here, can you speak to, ask why we're not getting the, I guess, the protection from the city police department at the games within the county, like we used to? Because I'm not too satisfied with the representation from the sheriff's department in the past few events we've had at Goldsboro High School. I know, police departments, due to the shortage of officers, because, they used to work part-time at games. Now the sheriff's department is covering those. Can you speak to that?
I can. I'd like to speak it offline, but being as how you
Okay,
brought it up.
okay,
Well, no, I will do that, because now that I've said that, everybody probably looking at each other like, oh, there's something nefarious going on. It's not. We had a case to where, I think 2 weekends in a row, we had officers working, and typically the officers that work those basketball events or football events, I think it was 3 that was working it. We had a couple of safety concerns there, and we requested that we go to 4. That way I've got an officer working with a partner. I don't, if I say a football game for one example, I don't have, I can put officers at one end of the field and 2 at the other end of the field. Officer safety. That was presented to the powers to be, and they didn't think 4 was needed. They thought they could get by with 3. I understand the cost savings, but in me it was a safety concern. So the schools decided to go to the sheriff's office because they said they could do it for 3. So they started doing it with 3, and then my understanding is the last couple of times they did it, they've actually reached back out to us and said, hey, look, could you send an officer over here to assist?
Is that?
Definitely want to get back in it, because I know, we need to be back out there. I think it's very beneficial, but that's the reason why it's
Thanks.
set up the way it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Chief, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Fletcher.
Who's that guy in that, David, who's that guy in that suit and tie?
It's odd.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
How about it works?
Yes, sir.
Afternoon, Mayor, Council. Hope everyone's doing well. I was given the opportunity to come and speak on behalf of Public Works 2022-23 budget items. First thing I think of when someone mentions budget for Public Works is funds for operations, funds for personnel, and funds for equipment. Funds for operations, material supplies, things to do our daily operations throughout the year. They're basically funded, not a big issue. After we go through the budget process, we typically have enough to get through, although with the current challenges with inflation and stuff, we'll see how next year goes. Funds for personnel, same, positions are approved, funding set aside to fund them. Filling them, on the other hand, is a whole other matter. In fact, just before I came over here, I had another one of my operators from solid waste turn in her resignation. Pay and equipment issues. We're always having, I'll get to that in the budget. I'm ad-libbing a little bit now, but that just happened on the way over, so I can reiterate the concerns with trying to fill. Pay is an issue, equipment is an issue, especially for my solid waste staff. And again, funds for equipment's the other thing I think about, like I just hit on a little bit. That has and will continue to be an issue in Public Works, I think, for at least the near future. We're also facing new challenges, even with the equipment that we're approved to purchase. Getting it has been a bit of a challenge, too. We were authorized to make some purchases last July. We held off till December, January, and that equipment, we'll get into it a little bit more, it's been backed up, some of it to 2023. So lots of challenges facing equipment for us anyway right now. So today I'm hoping to give a quick overview of our CIP for those of you that were here last year. It's going to look very familiar. I'm going to do some comparisons between last year and this year. I'm hoping to illustrate the ongoing concerns we have with the age and reliability of our equipment. As you know, older equipment, unreliable equipment impacts the level and quality of service we can provide our citizens. It affects morale and employee retention as we continue to experience. It also increases maintenance costs. There's a direct correlation between the age of the equipment and maintenance costs. It's going to go up almost linear. For this presentation, I only considered our Public Works heavy equipment and vehicles, typically rolling stock over $10,000. I did include in the first part of the presentation all funding sources for equipment, general fund, utility fund, and stormwater fund. I'm going to compare the numbers to 2021 to the presentation I gave then, and then look at what we have now after investing. We did invest $677,000 from the general fund last year in equipment for Public Works. $500,000 of that was for solid waste, and it did help. And $35,000 was from stormwater. Industry standard for the useful life of heavy equipment is 10 years, 8 to 10 years. Public Works, the 146 pieces of equipment we looked at, the average age in 2021 was 11.7 years. In fact, for the sake of time, we've got to speed up a little bit. I'll just do this. The blue, last year's numbers, the red, where we are today. So the investment that we made did make a little bit of a difference, but when you look at 15-year-old equipment, 35% of our equipment is 15 years old or older. That's still not good, but we made some improvement, and the same with the equipment that's over 10 years old. 53% is still over 10 years old. Better, but not great. Then, just to single out the general fund, because we're all competing for the general fund, police, fire, we're all competing for that. Unlike the utility fund and stormwater fund, I have a little more control over that. Any funds generated is put back into those programs, which makes it nice. But the general fund, I singled it out because we do compete, the numbers aren't as good. We don't get as much of the general fund as we probably need to maintain our equipment. As you see here, the red numbers were a little better, but still 45% of our equipment's over 15 years old. It's funded through the general fund. 63% is over 10 years old. Better, but again, not great. And to go even further, solid waste. They have the most and the oldest equipment in Public Works. They have, of the 146 pieces of equipment I looked at, 59 were in solid waste. The average age last year, and again, for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and do this. Last year was 16 years. The investment we made, the $500,000, did help. The average age now is just shy of 15 years, but we still have 32% of the equipment in solid waste that's over 20 years old, 50% is over 15 years old, and almost 70% is still over 10 years old. And again, I'll reiterate, it is the most used. It has the most rigid schedule. Trash, recycle, and refuse has to be picked up the day that it's scheduled, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. It's not the same as, we're doing a street repair. Truck goes down, we can block the street off, we can cone it off, we can wait till equipment's available to fix it. It's not as big of a deal. Solid waste, come in the mornings, and this has happened a few times. I haven't lost any sleep at night, but it's been challenging some mornings to shift equipment around to try to cover the refuse and recycle routes. You come in the morning, there's two, 3 trucks down, you have to make it happen one way or the other. Just shy of taking the front end loader out, I guess. We haven't been that bad yet, but it is a very rigid schedule, and there's not a lot of leeway, flexibility. We have 14,000 customers that are serviced multiple times in a day. Think about it. You have your recycle picked up the same day as your refuse. That's 2 times to come by your house, and then you have your leaf and limb service. That's a 3rd time. We have bulk pickup on Wednesday. So 14,000 customers, we usually service 28,000 in a week on average. High demand for the equipment. And you wouldn't believe how important solid waste is. Well, I do. I know. It's has to be done. This is the CIP. I used last year's CIP, just like I said, I wanted to do the comparison. I kept 2021 on here. These are last year's dollars as well, the costs. And this will just show the investment we made. We were allowed to purchase these 4 pieces of equipment, 3 transfer trailers and a rear loader. Still waiting for them, hoping to get the transfer trailers in the next month or 2. The rear loader, I just got notification last week. We thought it was going to be here any week, and they told us because of some supply issues, it could be another couple months before we get it. So again, that's kind of haunting us. The other thing I'll point out, that we were projected to purchase our next, start replacing our one-arm bandits. Our one-arm bandits are our newest piece of equipment over there as far as refuse and recycle. They're 8 years old. They're going to be 9 years old next year. Industry standards, 8 to 10 years. We're already seeing that in the maintenance, the downtime. The lady that just left, she was a one-arm operator. The cylinders, the wiring harnesses from wear and tear, moving. It's just becoming a bit of, not a nightmare, but more challenging to keep them up and running. So I had budget meetings all last week, or actually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday with all the divisions. I met with Fleet and Solid Waste kind of together, get the maintenance perspective on the equipment as well as the operators. And they agree that we probably need to move forward this year with purchasing at least one-arm Bandit to start moving them into the inventory, new ones into the inventory. We'll probably push out at least one of the rear loaders, but the, where's it at, leaf truck and leaf machine, we started the year out this year with 4 trucks operable. Within 2 weeks of going into the leaf season, we lost 3. One took a week, one took a month, one took 3 weeks to get up. It just put us behind, you know, as well as anyone, that we're perpetually behind all year because of the equipment. The equipment's a big deal. And that leaf truck, if you look at the age, is 25 years old. Nothing up here really is under 20 years old, 25, 30. So it's not unreasonable to ask for the stuff to be replaced and updated, modernized. And if you look, this is the investment just in solid waste to try to bring them up over the next 5 to 10 years. You're looking at, you know, half, $750,000, and that's last year's, those are last year's estimates. Just that rear loader, we finally, no one wants to give us an estimate. They don't know what next year is going to be like. They don't know how much the steel is going to cost. But someone did call and say that we're looking at least $340 to $350 versus $310 for a rear loader. I mean, for a one-arm Bandit next year if we order it this year. This is just a continuation for the next 5 years, just to show that, you know, we've projected out $600,000 to $700,000, $800,000 a year to bring solid waste up to current standard. Now, this is just pulling everything back in, general fund, that's funded through the general fund at Public Works. Buildings and grounds, streets, the garage, cemetery, all their equipment is funded through the general fund. And last year, as you can see, we requested $903,000 to replace that equipment, and this is what we got, which we're thankful for, $677,000. But that leaves a lot of stuff that's going to get shifted to the next year. And, you know, we've got a zero-turn mower, average with life expectancy of a mower is 5 years. We're pushing 15 on one. That's probably had at least 1, maybe 2 engines put on it, and then another one 7. So again, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect this stuff to be replaced so we can keep our equipment current and continue to provide the service that we need to provide. And this is just a graphic just to kind of summarize what I just talked about. Like I said, we were given $677,000 of the $940 last year that we asked for. The average over 10 years, based on last year's dollars, was about approaching $900,000 a year to try to keep our equipment current and be able to provide the service we want to provide. You could probably add 10% to that just because of what we're going through right now with inflation, materials, and everything else. So where do we go? First of all, I hope we can get the same support that we got last year. The $500,000 went a long ways for the solid waste equipment. They're probably in the most dire straits than anyone in Public Works, not to say there aren't needs elsewhere, but we've made it a commitment out there to focus on solid waste to make sure we get them, to get that 25 and 30-year-old equipment replaced. So I hope we can get your support again as we did last year. Things we can do, I mentioned these last year as well. Reduce the level of service. I don't think that's anything anyone wants to really do, but it is an option. You know, reduce leaf and limb. Some municipalities don't do that year-round. They don't do white goods year-round. So maybe we could pull back on those, reduce costs and overhead, and invest the savings in equipment. Just an option. Increase rates. Our rates haven't been increased in 10 years. 2012 was the last time we had a rate increase for refuse, and it was $1.25. Costs have gone up in the last 10 years considerably. Every dollar equates to roughly $160,000 that we can invest in equipment. Set up a capital reserve for equipment replacement. I've talked to the finance director in passing about this. It's something we can do. It's just going to take a commitment from everyone here to start setting money aside, money that's hard to come by now, to set it aside and start building up a fund where we can just go out and we're more readily available to purchase the equipment that we need, not just for Public Works, but for everyone else in the city as well. And then the other thing I throw out there is establish a solid waste enterprise fund. Solid waste raises money between the fee that we collect The base contract that we've been in now for a couple of years generates about $90,000 or $100,000 in revenue. We also have a solid waste dumpster program that we run that generates revenues every year as well. Let it operate off the funds it collects rather than dump it all into the general fund and we have to compete for it. Leave it in solid waste, let us run it as a business. Just food for thought. That was a lot. I went fast. Trying to make up some time. Hope it wasn't too fast or.
I did- You go ahead.
No, just-
I do have a question. I've noticed in the city, and I've seen landscapers do this a lot now, they're putting the pine needles in the street. I mean, they're not putting them on the, and that attributes to a lot of the.
Stormwater issue.
A lot of the storm drainage and all that, because every time there's a 5-minute downpour, I'm at my corner intersection, literally with my pitchfork taking neat, and I mean, the street sweepers, that's cool, but I think there's a bigger need for those gutters to be cleaned out. And if those people are putting stuff in the street, they need to be cited. I mean, they need to be given a citation.
I agree.
Or
Code
put a door
enforcement.
hanger on the door, because that's a problem. I mean, that stuff is going in the drains and I live between Leslie and Lionel on Mulberry. If it rains 5 minutes, I mean, the water's about 3 inches deep, just from pine needles being pushed in those drains,
That's a
so.
perpetual problem.
Don't you
Code
have
enforcement
designated
can
areas?
address that specifically if there's an address.
Okay.
We will too. We'll go up and tell them when we pick up do the leaf and limb pickup, they're supposed to put a flyer, let them know. Technically, we could leave it and put a flyer, but they don't want to, we try to do what we can for the citizens, and we'll go ahead and take it just to get it done, but we probably should tag the door. Code enforcement, if it's a continued problem with the resident, code enforcement can notify them as well. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Don't you have designated areas for leaves and pines?
It's supposed to be up on the
street
yard, the
side,
curb,
north side.
just off the curb, not in the curb.
Not
and
in the
gutter.
curb. And one more thing, Mr. Rick, I know in some areas of town, when they use the claw, I mean, it digs in the dirt, but in some areas and neighborhoods, I mean, they're ever so gingerly picking it up with. So I don't know if it's certain areas where they're just dropping it, because I've had to re-sow my seeds in my yard a couple times where the claws just dug in, and I mean, you can see the indentions in there.
That's one, we get calls a lot,
Okay.
but that's not one that I've.
And I'm not
very
complaining
often.
about it, I mean, I don't mind getting my
No,
stuff
it's fine.
back,
It just
but in
could
a
have
lot
been
of
a
areas.
New
I hear
operator,
complaints.
we're going through staff, new operator training or something like that. But call us, let us know, and we'll go out and fix it too. I mean, we've had new operators actually run up on curb, in training and whatnot, and we'll fix it. But
Yes, sir.
that's not something that occurs frequently that I'm aware of anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rick.
This Parks and Rec, Ms. Felicia.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't figured it out now, it is a running theme with the departments presenting to you today, where we're having personnel issues as well as equipment issues, and I am no different. So for Parks and Recreation, this is our mission. Essentially, we provide services for all the citizens of Goldsboro, as well as, Wayne County, because, anyone that wants to come and participate with us, we let them. So for Parks and Recreation, we have 37 full-time authorized positions and 6 permanent part-time authorized positions. Of the 37 authorized positions, 4 are currently vacant. We hope to be filling one, hopefully within the next week, but we have 4 vacant full-time positions. 5 of those 6 permanent part-time positions are custodians. And the custodians aren't just for Parks and Recreation. Our custodians clean City Hall Annex, this facility, downtown development, the hub. They clean those facilities in addition to our specific Parks and Recreation facilities. And we're currently down 1 permanent part-time custodian. So for Parks and Recreation, everyone pretty much knows that we provide programs. I mean, we do youth athletics, adult athletics, we do programs for seniors, programs for special populations, but I'm going to be focusing more on things that you may not know that we do. So for our operational budget, and let me be clear, this is just our annual operational budget. This does not include personnel costs. This is just our annual operational budget. I gave the last 3 years of our budgets. So for FY 19-20, we were $721,000, a little more than that. FY 2021, we were approved for a little more than $724,000. That was also during COVID time, so we actually ended up turning some money back in. But for this current fiscal year, FY 21-22, $671,584. That's a significant drop in our annual operating budget for what we are asked to do, for the more things that we are asked to do that I'm going to touch on. And like I said, these numbers do not include our personnel costs, and it's not including our capital projects, which we were not funded for any capital projects for this current fiscal year. TC Coley. As many of you know, TC Coley is the old W.A. Foster Center. When we got our new W.A. Foster Center, you all as council and listen to our citizens wanted to save the building. Save the building, renovated the building, renamed the building, tried to go some different routes with it that didn't work. So the building was turned back over to Parks and Recreation for us to maintain. But again, with that previous slide, our budget didn't increase. These are the annual costs that I have actual numbers for what it costs us to maintain this building. HVAC yearly contract, you see it's almost $7,400. The HVAC contract for TC Coley is more than the HVAC for W.A. Foster Center in Mineral Park. And for obvious reasons, W.A. Foster in Mineral Park, brand new facility. Even though it's almost 1.5 times the size, it's a brand new facility, more energy efficient. So the HVAC contract for TC Coley costs more. Utility bills, plus or minus $7,000 a year. And again, that's going to be determined upon how hot is it in the year, how cold is it in the year. Staffing costs to maintain the facility, roughly, $3,700 a year. And these are my very, very, very conservative estimates, because we send a staffer over to clean it once a week. If we have more rentals, they go and clean it more. This cost includes cleaning of the facility. It includes when our staff goes to mow the yard. It includes when our staff goes to inspect the playground equipment, when we add mulch to the playground equipment. That's what that cost includes. That's why I say it's a very lowball number, because we're not there every day. Well, of course, isn't included in that cost is some of the things that you all council asked us to look into previously, renovating the restrooms. That's not included in the cost. We have a section of roof that needs to be replaced. That's not included in my annual cost because I don't have it in my budget, and it wasn't given to me in this current budget.
Question. At this time, how many permanent tenants do you have?
Currently, we just have the one permanent renter of Astrid Boxing, and he is paying his monthly rental fee, his lease fee. We have it open for people to come in and rent. We have a couple of groups that come in maybe once or twice a month, but it's not someone's coming in every Sunday to rent, or, we have an organization that's coming in every week to do a program.
So the boxing contract would generate probably, what, $12,000, $14,000 a year?
A little less than that, because it's $450 a month.
Yeah. And what would you estimate your other tenants' revenues? Or renters, not
Yeah,
tenants?
because, and remember, with all of our facilities, if you're a nonprofit, you essentially pay half the rate. So if it's $40 to rent a room for 2 hours, you're paying $20 for 2 hours, and that's who we're getting, like some people that are interested in starting up churches, so they've established a nonprofit. So if it's like $20 a month, I mean, you're looking at maybe, I would say $300 a year.
300?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not generating a lot of revenue for this facility, which, like I said, I understand the reason why council wanted to keep it, but that's why I'm bringing it to your attention, because, again, since we took it over, I put in the budget, we need these things to maintain this facility, and like everyone else, because of funding issues, is not in there. So I can't maintain the facility the way you all wanted us to maintain it. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention.
Do you have any bids or quotes on the additional costs that you're citing up there?
I started a bid process a little over a year ago to replace that section of roof, and that was going to run about $40,000 to $45,000. I have not done anything with the restroom renovation when I knew we wouldn't have the funding for it. I didn't even try to go out and get costs for that.
That roof estimate was last year, right?
Yes,
Which would now be 20, 30% more.
definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Felicia,
Yes.
whenever the vote was held to renovate the T.C. Coley Community Center, you know, we were told what the cost estimates were to remodel it. They ran over twice what we said. And then it was supposed to be self-sufficient after that. The city was not going to have any responsibilities. I knew it was a money drain from day one, and I don't know why we didn't just tear it down. You know, it angers me.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I will say, we do get, particularly during the summer months, as, you know, we continue to get word out there that the facility is available for people to use. We are getting more and more inquiries for family reunions and things of that nature, but I'll go back to things we request in the budget that we don't get. That facility does not have tables and chairs like this facility. So if someone comes to us and wants to do a family reunion, even though we're offering them a great rate, we may have 5 tables in that recreation room, and they need 20. And then, well, can we pull from your other facilities, which is Herman Park Center and W.A. Foster? Well, the issue with that is we have activities, programs, and rentals going on there, so we can't pull those tables and chairs. So when, you know, I was asking for more tables and chairs, we didn't get it, that kind of puts a damper on, you know, people's access to the facility. You know, sometimes people do go out and either go to a church and borrow tables and chairs, or they may be able to rent it. But that facility, for the size of that particular room, the recreation room, we don't have near the number of tables, near the number of tables and chairs that that room should hold.
Well, Ms. Felicia, let me ask you this. Would it be wise to invest in that equipment so you would get more renters that would be able to utilize that space?
Really, at this point, that's, again, that was one of the reasons why I was bringing it to council's attention, is to bring it to your attention so you all can direct us, which way do you want us to go?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, do you want to continue to put the investment in the building? Do you want to look at selling the building? Do you want us to shut the building down? You know, whatever that is, but I do think that you all need to be aware of, you know, the situation with the building.
Because I think the biggest, what Mr. Acock was saying about tearing it down, I think the biggest selling point on that was the proximity to people that have access to a location. Because even though you have a new W.A. Foster, a lot of people on that Beale Street, Now Street, Olivia Lane, they may not have transportation, may be able to walk to this location, as opposed to having to go all the way to John Street. And my Masonic Lodge is directly behind it. We used to rent that space out, but due to the upstairs being the only area where people could walk, and elderly people quite naturally couldn't walk all those steps, that was why they wanted to utilize the current T.C. Coley. But I think if we were to have more investment in, like I said, tables and chairs, maybe we could make more money from a rental standpoint for things of that nature, so.
All right, downtown streetscape. That's the next thing I wanted to point out to you all. Several of you do, of course, know, but Parks and Recreation, we are responsible for the plantings up and down Center Street. That's from Center and Ash to Center and M. We're responsible for all of those plantings, maintaining those plantings. We're responsible for mowing that area. We're responsible for mowing the hub. We're responsible for cleaning the restrooms at the hub. But again, this was given to us, and going back to my slide, our annual operating budget wasn't increased. So again, we're asked to do more, not with what we had, but more with less. And so I'm in a situation where I'm kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, trying to work magic with my budget numbers to make this happen. Our parks maintenance staff, they have a total of 6 mowers. 2 of those mowers are specifically dedicated for Center Street. But when it comes to mowing Center Street, they often pull the other 4 mowers in to help mow Center Street. And, Rick mentioned it earlier as far as doing the rotation, because let me be clear, we're talking about 0-turn mowers. We try to do a rotation, swap one out each year, so we won't be coming to you saying, we need 5 new mowers this year. Well, FY 18-19, we didn't get a new mower. FY 19-20, we did not get a new mower. We did get a new mower FY 2021, but as I started off this presentation, fiscal year 21-22, what we're in now, no capital projects. That includes, we did not get a new mower.
Question. Whose responsibility is it for the maintenance, landscape maintenance of the medium from, of Ash Street from Berkeley Boulevard, from Ash Street back towards the base to their property line? Is it you or is it Public Works?
Neither at this point. I'm going to look to the city manager. I believe going into, I think last year's budget, definitely this year's budget, I think it was turned over to planning and they were contracting it out just because we are talking about the highway as far as like the plantings, because we have done it previously, but going forward, I want to say that the maintaining of that median is now under planning department, but they contract that out for someone to come and maintain it.
Do you know if that's correct?
I believe that's the case, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And, again, aware of what our budget situation is, I'm not planning on asking for any mowers with our, FY 22-23 budget, but I will be like putting a letter in saying these are things that we could be asking for, but we're not asking for, particularly with our mowers. We've actually taken them to the welder, and, they've patched up several of our decks, and, some of our mowers, how even fire, they're talking about like number of hours. Our meter has worn off or died, so we try to put another one up there. So let's just say we have a lot of hours on our mowers.
One other question. On the Center Street landscape, isn't there a garden club that takes one of those locations or 2 of those locations to plant flowers and maintain it?
So with the garden club, they kind of adopted an area. I believe originally they were kind of like at Center and Ash, and we kind of moved them further along into Center Street so they won't have to deal with so much traffic. But for that, we purchase the flowers that they go out there and plant. And then once they plant them, again, it's our staff that come back and maintain and water them. But really do help us out with planting them.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Herman Park tennis courts. Herman Park tennis courts, they were resurfaced back in 2013. This was the same year that we hosted our first USTA North Line Singles Adult League State Championships. That was actually one of the reasons why they were resurfaced, because we were trying to get that tournament in. We've hosted that tournament along with many others since 2013. I have a little star there because in 2020, USTA did not do the tournament. They didn't bring it to Goldsboro. They didn't take it anywhere. They didn't do the tournament because, remember, thinking COVID. But the USTA tournament alone has had an economic impact of over $1 million. And these are numbers I'm pulling straight from travel and tourism, so we can think of economic impact. That's people coming from outside of the city and county, coming here specifically for that tournament, staying in our hotels, eating in our restaurants, buying their gas. It's not me coming in to watch a tournament and then, eating at a restaurant on my way home. We're talking about other people. So, like I said, we've had a lot of success with that tournament. It's time for the tennis courts to be, resurfaced again. Again, this is an item that I have put in my capital project budget each year. But again, just because of, budget issues, because like I said, we're all facing it, it's one of the things that, just keeps getting pulled. But again, it's just something that I just wanted to make you all aware, because the biggest thing is Herman Park tennis courts. Those are 10 tennis courts. So yes, that's a large number, but we're talking about 10 tennis courts. And when I say resurface, what I'm talking about is going in, because, you know, you got cracks on the court, so whoever we get, clean out the cracks, put like a sealant in, and put like 3 or 4 coats of this asphalt paint down. I'm not talking about tearing up the courts and starting new. If we were to do that, that's a lot more money. So what this is truly a patch. But like I said, that's something that we've continuously delayed, and, you know, it's really dependent on time when we get to that point where we can't save it anymore. You know, living in North Carolina, for the most part, we have mild winters, so that's helped us out. But at some point, we're going to have to look at resurfacing these courts, or, you know, trying to find the funding to put in new courts. And I believe that was my last thing. Like I said, we have a lot going on with Parks and Recreation. I just wanted to specifically touch on things that you all may not be aware that we have our hand in. There are other issues and things we have going on, but I'll save that for another day.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions?
Felicia, do your recreation programs pay for themselves with the cost you charge, or is that coming out of general fund? To what degree?
So with our budget, we're budgeted money to put on our recreation programs, and that's where where we get the officials and things of that nature. We're given a certain budget. But we do charge fees for our recreation programs, and we do bring in money that covers the costs, you know, of those uniforms. Going into this year, you know, and everybody was conservative with their numbers, but when you look at our 5-year trend, we're going up with the revenues we're bringing in. But with last fiscal year, our revenues were, when we were doing the budget, maybe half of what we have been bringing in, because, again, I keep going back to COVID. I mean, we didn't have a fall soccer league. We didn't do a winter basketball league. We were doing a spring soccer league, and we were recovering some of those revenues. So going into this year, you know, because operating budget pays for uniforms, pays for sports equipment. If you're not offering basketball, you don't need to get basketball uniforms. I mean, that was the thought process. But at this point, what was estimated we would bring in for this year, low numbers, we've surpassed it, which is good, but it also means I'm blowing through my budget. So,
But those, what you charge is covering those costs?
Yes.
Or is it a negative that you're coming back to general fund money for?
no, we are covering our costs when it comes to the end of the year, and, you know, during this time of the year and towards the end of the year, we're asked, where are you at with spending? What additional monies do you think you're going to need to get to the end of the year? Even with our reduction this year, we should still be okay, but only because, going back to my vacant positions. Again, as I said, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm letting those positions sit vacant because the money that I would be paying for those positions, I'm able to help offset the additional costs of the more teams, you know, those more expenses. But we are bringing in the revenue, so we're not in the negative. But like I said, going forward, you know, I want to be able to fill those positions and get back to where we were, at least with our annual operating budget, because whereas before we weren't having any teams participate because of mandates, we are busting the seams with, you know, kids coming out wanting to participate in our leagues.
One final question for me. The accounting of volunteer hours that you do for the, all your facilities for that matter, how is it going?
It's going good. So
You want to explain what I'm talking about?
So specifically with our blind multi-sport complex, which is the 8 rectangular field sports complex we have, when we first opened it up, we were approached by several groups wanting to have access to that facility to use it at no cost. So we kind of went back and forth, bartered with them, saying, okay, if you give us volunteer hours, you can use this facility at no cost to you, including access to lights at night. And so we've had at least one other group come to us wanting to use it I know two of the original groups, we haven't heard from in a while, that's the semi-pro teams, but the two youth athletic groups, soccer groups specifically, they are still using it, and they are still like giving us back volunteer hours in return. But one of the issues that we are looking at is because we are growing in our numbers for us recreational sport-wise, the request that they have to use the facility, they're not necessarily going to be able to get moving forward. So whereas before, particularly when we first opened, Group A, I want to come and use it Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Great, have at it. We got, some rec league going on. It's not going to interfere. We got tournaments on the weekends. You can help us with this tournament so we don't have to staff it as much. Now, because our recreational league sports have grown, we're needing to play Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So that same group that previously had, I don't want to say full access, but had more access because we're growing, they're not going to be able to get as much access. So I'd see their volunteer hours also going down. But like I said, it's a good problem we have.
Any other questions? Thank you, Felicia.
All right, thank you.
And Scott, IT. Then we'll take a break.
Afternoon. Thank you, folks, for letting me have a chance to talk with you. It's going to be a little repetitive about the same things the other folks said, but kind of try to give you an overview and a little bit about future. Good news about it is we're actually tracking through some savings we did this year and we spoke about before. We are tracking under our budget that we had requested for the year, so we believe we'll be able to turn some things back in and have a less operational fund request for next year. Salaries will be a little higher because of what changes we've made. Staffing is still a concern. We have filled 2 of the vacancies we got towards the end of the year, the 3 that we received. We do have 3 vacancies though. 2 of them have been proven difficult to fill. Staff pay is a concern in that. That's been one of the challenges, and I think they need to get reviewed to see where it's competitive or not. I think some others have seen the same thing. Vehicles has always been an issue for us. That's something that's got better, but it's still an issue going forward. We still need to do some more with it. This is just a picture of where we are now. The ones that are the orange ones are the most recently added positions. There's 1 vacancy there and 1 here, and then there's a vacant programmer from back in September. That one's been one that's been challenging to fill. But we did get 2 of the ones for the 3 that we had in December. The additional staffing needs going forward, I'm not saying we should do all this right this moment, but this is where we need to go in the future, I believe, to properly staff the department to keep up with the growing needs that we've had. We've had a server administrator, database administrator, IT project manager has been something we've been asking for. They've not shown up every time in a budget, but that's something that we have seen a need for over the years. The cybersecurity portion of that server administrator is something we added on to that role because of we have somewhere around 90 servers that do not have a dedicated person dealing with them right now. It's spread out among a few of us. Databases is sort of the same story. You have one person kind of tasked with both of those and another job, so it gets a little bit cumbersome at the higher level. We have, right now, if you look at projects in our list, there's about 37 of them, and that's also something we have to manage between myself and the assistant director, trying to manage those as well as doing the regular part of our job. So those 2 first ones become a big deal for us in terms of staff hours and overtime. The computer system administrator, the 3rd one in the list, is really somebody to answer the phones, do the basic tier 1 support. That's spread out among several staff. We like to get somebody that has a consistent voice there for people answering the phone all the time, so you're not getting 4 different people when you call, which is what it is right now. Vehicle-wise, we have the current vehicles that we have a 97 van that is moderate, but something we're having to hold on to right now. We did get one new vehicle in '21, which has been really helpful, and we appreciate that. We have one van that we're trying to use, replace a Malibu that we had to surplus in June because of failures. That '02 Malibu was beyond repair. So it went to surplus in anticipation of a vehicle we received this year, which we haven't gotten yet. There's been some availability issues that y'all probably aware of that. So we're hoping that we can still get that one. We'll be requesting some others in the new budget year. Capital needs, just to kind of give a summary. Next coming up year is the time in our capital improvement plan where we would be doing replacement of our telephone system. And then the vehicles are also listed in there for the coming year. The stuff after that is things that we have planned for more long-term needs, and it's something that we have a cycle of replacement on for network equipment, computers, things like that. One thing I highlight in there is the City Hall chiller and boiler replacement at $250. That's something that we talked about last year, a little bit year before, talking about it this year. We're saying next year, but that's something that is causing problems with maintenance and with continual issues. That's the stuff that was, one of the boiler was just refurbished when they remodeled the building in '05. The chiller was put in at that time. And so they're aging out, and it's getting hard to find parts, hard to find replacement things, and having to be a little more creative in repairs. So it's, that's something we need to look at sooner than later. The other items on there are just stuff to make you aware of what's coming up in the future, things that we had planned. They are part of our CIP. And that was it. So do you have any questions about any of those items? I rushed through because I know we're running short on time. But
What's the status of the computer replacement program?
Replacement program, we got the funding back in December because of supply chain issues and things. A lot of stuff that we wanted to buy was not available any longer, or it would not be till May or June or July. So we had to revamp, start over, essentially getting different models, different specs, which we've completed, and we anticipate doing our purchase orders this week to get those items ordered, and they have a shorter turnaround time on getting them to us now because of the ones we're buying. We did make a lot of changes because of just unavailability. A lot of that equipment's not able to be gotten, but we can get something suitable replacement for it, for what we had planned to buy. So I don't think we're losing anything on it. I just think it's a modification we had to make that took a little time to redo our stuff. It's all state contract stuff, so it's not a big difference in what we're getting in the end. Some of it is a lot better, so it works out good in the end for that. And server, we have another piece of that. That was our server, back-end storage and server infrastructure. That is on site. We're started this coming week. Actually be doing some of that replacement work this week, and we hope in the next 2 weeks we'll implement that. But we do already have that equipment. It took from December to last week to get it in, so it's a little slow on some of our stuff.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
At this time, according to the schedule, we have a 15-minute break. It's 2:52. We're running a little bit behind. Can we do that in 10 minutes?
Yeah, that'd be great, sir, and then maybe the next presentation can be a little bit shorter to get back on track. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, let's break. It's 2:52. Let's be back here at 3:08. Okay, if you'll take your seats, please, we'll get started. Okay, everybody's in their places with all shiny faces. Okay, we're up to community development. Ms. Felicia?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here to provide an update on our CDBG CV funding. CDBG CV, which is short for coronavirus, funds must be used to prepare for, prevent, respond to the coronavirus, and that is also known as the PPR tieback. Eligible activities with CDBG CV funding are assistance to businesses, including special economic development assistance, public services, including emergency subsistence payments, housing, including rehabilitation and reconstruction, conversion and acquisition, buildings and improvement, including public facilities, planning, capacity building, and technical assistance. And also per HUD regulations, we are required to expend 70% of CDBG funds to benefit low to moderate income individuals and households. We have received 2 rounds of CDBG CV funding. The first round, allocated October 2020, was in the amount of $206,554. Round 2 of the funding came in August 2021 for a total amount of $220,749. The total allocation, the 2 rounds, $427,303. To date, we have expended $40,542.54 of CDBG CV funding. There are a few agencies under contract per fiscal year 2020's annual action plan. As you see, 4-day movement was not proposed in the 2020 annual action plan, but they did reach out for assistance. And so we executed a contract with 4-day movement. Wages, Salvation Army, Partnership for Children of Wayne County, and the YMCA. Total commitment for the 5 agencies is $156,123. Breakdown of the CDBG CV spending per HUD's IDIS system, $31,056.36 has been drawn down for administration. Per records on file, $4,616.90 has been reimbursed to wages. Per records on file, $4,869.28 has been reimbursed to the Salvation Army, for a total amount of expenditures at $40,542.54. 4-day movement has been allocated $50,000. All the contracts with the local agencies will expire this June 30th, 2022. 4-day movement will continue to provide temporary shelter to low to moderate income families and vulnerable populations directly impacted by COVID-19. Wages been allocated $41,123, again with the contract expiring June 30th, and they will continue to provide assistance to low to moderate income senior citizens directly impacted by COVID-19 by delivering Meals on Wheels daily. They propose to serve at least 500 meals to individuals and households. Salvation Army has been allocated $30,000 with the contract expiring June 30th. They will continue to provide assistance to low to moderate income families directly impacted by COVID-19. They will continue to provide rent assistance, utilities assistance, assistance with clothing and food. The agency proposes to serve at least 50 households or 200 individuals. Partnership for Children of Wayne County been allocated $20,000 with a contract expiring June 30th. They are working on a project to provide additional playground equipment to child care facilities within low to moderate income census tracts to promote outdoor play with the goal of preventing the spread of COVID-19. And this project, again, will serve targeted low to moderate income neighborhoods and areas. The YMCA has been allocated $15,000 with a contract expiring June 30th. They are working towards constructing a food bank at the Boys and Girls Club on Royal Avenue, which is located in a low to moderate income census tract to benefit low to moderate income families directly impacted by COVID-19. And just a snapshot of the funding, the balance left to fund agencies that are under contract is $146,636.82. Balance left for administration is $54,404.24. So the total remaining balance of CDBG-CV funding will be $201,041.06. We have discussed some proposed activities, city manager, myself, other staff, and HUD. So one of the proposed activities is broadband access to low to moderate income residents, and that would include installing Wi-Fi on city-owned water towers that are located within low to moderate income census tract. And I did learn that this was an activity that Councilwoman Matthews had proposed or suggested. So three of the city's five water towers are eligible and are located within low to moderate income census tract. Approximate cost of project would be $120,000 to $160,000. That is an estimate of the total cost of the project. The remaining funds can go towards the $907,913 of home ARP for homelessness. And then we are open to taking any recommendations if you have any suggestions, any thoughts on how else we can expend or spend the CDBG-CV funding.
Question,
Yes, sir.
the RFP for the homeless commission facilitator, what is the status of that?
We have not received any bids to date, any proposals to date, but the bid is still open with a close date of March 2nd.
So we've not received one single.
Not as of yet, but before we decided on the process, the city manager and I had discussed, and he had asked that I reach out to a few agencies. So I did meet with an agency based out of Raleigh that are interested, and they are preparing a bid or a proposal.
Okay.
Ms. Felicia.
Just still have a few weeks before it closes out. So I'm confident that we have at least one agency who's preparing their proposal.
Were you going to comment to that?
Yeah, Felicia, how long is this money good for? When do we have to have it spent by?
Home ARP,
No? CDBG, CV?
CV, we have 6 years from the date of the allocation.
Okay, so let's say these other organizations don't spend all their money by June 30th, 2022. We can turn around and give them the money again if they have a need going forward, or we can turn around and use it into, say, the home ARP homelessness issue, or whatever else council would like to do.
Yes, and that's something I would bring back to City Council, provide another update, and see how you would like to move forward. Do we want to continue funding agencies who are providing essential services in the community, or would we want to look at maybe in addition to that, the broadband project, or adding to the home ARP?
So one of the reasons why we don't have broadband in our towers right now, it is about $40,000 worth of equipment to put up there that the previous company we contracted with, Open Broadband, has not had the funding for. And then there's issues with what the city can or can't own or support in this. And Scott Williams is working that pretty closely with authorities at the UNC School of Government, and we're working this with HUD to see if we can find a way to spend it with what council has decided they would like to do.
And that's kind of what I was going to piggyback on what he just said. I know the initial startup of install for the broadband will cost, but over time, wouldn't they be able to pay us a fee for utilizing our space?
We can't run the business.
Okay.
Scott, you want to come on up and talk to
Yes.
that real quick?
And we have, Scott and I, a few weeks ago, we did have a consultation with HUD and just kind of discussed all of the details.
There are still some details to work out. The General Assembly passed legislation years ago that forbids us from being able to be in that competitive market space for broadband, really in any capacity. There's two municipalities got grandfathered in, were Salisbury and Wilson, to be able to run broadband systems. So we can't put stuff in charge for it like that, and so there's not going to be a recoup of anything in that respect. So we have to really work with a third party, and there's some facility to be able to do that, and that's what we're trying to work out the details on, to see what we have to do to follow HUD's guidelines for the money as well as the state's guidelines for what we need to do as far as broadband's concerned. So that's the details. we're
So
trying to
for
sort out.
instance, we can maybe buy the equipment with HUD money, right? And maybe the company can maintain it.
Yeah, and we had discussions about, and we're not sure exactly how it'll be, but potentially, and there's a couple of models, but one might be to buy the equipment, provide that, and let the company maintain it for use of it. And so we don't have to have extra expenditures after that, but we would own it. They would maintain it and therefore get some use out of it that we didn't have to recoup back. So, but we have to make sure that money doesn't have to go back into the fund then as well. So that's another thing to consider.
Well, if we did this, would it be piggybacking what the county contracted for several years ago to have the private company come in to be able to do the wireless broadband solution?
It does, similar to that, is the wireless what the county didn't really include the city other than like downtown.
Right.
And so we didn't have anywhere, and it's a company we've dealt with before, and they have some stuff at the base of our tanks, but we don't know who exactly it would be or what exactly would be happening, but it's the same idea. It's just we're doing it for low, moderate income area only. And if the county did something that included Goldsboro, then they could cover the other tower or some other areas that's not low to moderate income in what they're doing, but we would only be focused on that low to moderate income with her money.
If there's already a company on the hook that the county has, could there be some cost savings for approaching that particular company and asking them to tie on their existing infrastructure?
Well, the thing is, we'll have to do, and we have some interaction with the company they're using
Okay,
right now.
that's what I was asking.
But we have to look at what HUD's guidelines are. Federal funding, you're generally going to have to bid it out anyway, or at least put out a request for proposal to get respondent companies, which could be that company, but that's no guarantee that they would be the ones we would do. They would have to compete like anyone else for that kind of money.
I definitely think it's imperative to jump on that because if we would ever have to go remote again, a lot of our students within the inner city schools didn't have access to do assignments because they were in dead spots, so their parents just couldn't afford, internet or whatever. So I think that's something, as Mr. Pope said, education and housing are two of the essential things for economic growth, and I think that's something that we need to look at for all areas to have equality when it comes to broadband. So.
And we had just during the pandemic, a sort of side note, we have free Wi-Fi downtown that we did years ago that we don't charge for, but it's not in the buildings, it's just outside. But we filled up the street. I mean, it was full, and so was what would used to be Cornerstone Commons, got just tons of people doing it for schoolwork. And we actually increased that bandwidth availability about threefold to accommodate people using it. So we saw a big increase. So you can see where the issues were at that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Scott.
Any other questions?
Any other?
Well, I had a question that I'd asked at the meeting, at our city council meeting, and it was about the 2020 CAPER, the program, and it said that we had to spend $31,037 of CDBG funds between now and May 2nd, 2022. So did we lose that, funding, or what happened?
No, ma'am. That is a matter of HUD requiring us to use, before the allocation runs out, we cannot have more than 1.5% of the allocation left over. So we just have that small amount that we have to spend by whatever that May date is to meet that timeliness requirement.
Yeah, May 2nd.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so, but we actually got 38,000?
38, that's a different number.
Well, that was 2019. You answered the question.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll talk with you more about it, but my concern was the 31,000. Did we lose that? That was.
No, ma'am. We just have until that date to spend the rest of that CDBG funds from that allocation because of that timeliness rule.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Ms. Williams,
Mhm.
can you explain that the remaining funds, or what you were referring to when you talked about the bid process for that, and then the deadline on March the 2nd, just so everybody is kind of clear on what you're talking about and then who you're actually seeking out for that, the bid, or how
Well,
we're moving forward with the homelessness initiative?
Right. We can't seek out anyone in particular. As Scott mentioned, HUD does require us to put bids out for requests for proposals. And then we have to follow those procurement guidelines with carrying out that process. So the bid was placed a few weeks ago. And so, again, we have to adhere to that. And the deadline is March 2nd. And so we do have a few more weeks left to receive some proposals. And again, our just kind of premature, but not in a bad way, way of trying to look ahead and start planning for what we're going to do with the money before HUD provided the guidance. I was reaching out to some agencies looking for help before we knew what the official guidance was.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Before Ms. Archibald comes up, let me just, come on up, Sherry. Let me introduce why Sherry's here today. Each year, when we sit down for budget time, we talk about contributions to various nonprofit organizations. And we generally have some reoccurring organizations that we give money to and others that are nominated by a council member or they come forward and request. The county does theirs a little bit different. They allocate the monies to United Way. United Way has a commission of individuals. 10, 11, maybe, Sherry?
So the county, annually, I'm not sure what they do because it's changed quite a bit, but for their CARES funding is how we came into play and supported their efforts.
So I invited Sherry here today, and everybody knows who Sherry is, to talk about the county's process and let us hear that, and maybe we may consider that in our upcoming budget. So go ahead, Mrs.
Sure.
Archibald.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here today with you. As the mayor was mentioning, I was invited to provide a presentation to you to determine if there is an avenue for a mutually beneficial collaboration. So it's my pleasure to talk to you just a moment and share with you a little bit about our process and about United Way. I think you all have a brochure already, I hope. United Way is recognized all over the world. Nationally, there are 1,200 United Way agencies, and in North Carolina, there are 50. Our missions are very similar in each location, but they work autonomously for the community that they serve. So United Way of Wayne County, our mission is to bring people and resources together so that we can improve lives in our community. And how we do that, how the mission is supported is we partner with multiple nonprofits so that we can provide programs that are impacting 4 focus areas that United Way addresses. We also identify issues in our community and work to find solutions, and often those are through collaborations with different agencies. All right, we have a community campaign. Many of you are probably familiar with us, and that may be how you know us best. Annually, we look at that campaign where we invite businesses and individuals to contribute to United Way in support of vetted programs and support services annually. In 2021, with a goal of $850,000, the United Way of Wayne County reached 90% of that goal. We're supported by more than 80 major investors plus individuals and donors, and that includes the schools as well. So I mentioned 4 focus areas to you. For United Way, we look at 4 different focus areas that we want to address, improving or impacting in our community. And they are education, financial stability, health and wellness, or basic needs, or community responsiveness. And you'll see all of these different programs that are listed under each focus area. So we do have 14 different agencies that we partner with in support of 20 different programs. So the community Investment Committee's work is critical for an unbiased and fiscal oversight in support of the programs that we support. We receive grant applications. Our Community Investment Committee reviews them, visits the sites, interviews the nonprofits, and makes recommendations to our Board of Directors. The Board of Directors makes the final approval. And those grants are distributed quarterly, and reporting is done once to twice a year. I mentioned that the oversight of the final approval is from our Board of Directors, and they're listed right here. Our annual meeting is tomorrow morning, and so currently our board chair is Donna Phillips with Wayne County Public Libraries. And as of tomorrow, that will change over to Walter Krentz, who is with First Bank. Bethany Perry is remaining on as our campaign chair for the 2022 year. I mentioned the Community Investment Committee. You'll see them listed as the longest here. It is quite an investment of time, especially when we're preparing to vet these programs. It is a lot of work. They do a wonderful job, but we need so many because there are so many programs, and so when you're visiting all those different programs, in order to not inundate that volunteer with so many different site visits, we split it up into the 4 focus areas. I wanted to mention all of our different committees, though, because you in the audience might be interested in supporting any one of those, and we would love to have you as well. So our volunteers sign a conflict of interest form and do not contribute to committees or subcommittees that they or a family member are currently serving. And I couldn't not take this opportunity to tell you about 211. Hopefully everyone here is familiar with it. It is a United Way branded call center. It's available 24/7. It is supported by our United Way, but United Way is all across the state. And so you probably have heard much about it during disaster time, because at that time, the governor is usually referring folks to call 211. So in recognizing your desire to support our nonprofits in our community, but the challenge is to administer the process, this is what we do. And so this was an opportunity for us to talk about options to support local nonprofits through 2 ways. And so you'll see them listed here. One way could be to support the community campaign, which, as I mentioned, we set a goal annually, and we raise funds in order to support nonprofits in our community around those 4 focus areas. So if you wanted to contribute the funds that you allocate for nonprofits directly to that campaign, you could do so, and those funds would go directly to those nonprofits that are determined through our Community Investment Committee to support. Another option would be option B, which would be that the City Council would identify their own focus areas. Maybe you have the same focus areas that we do, but maybe you have additional focus areas. And so you would want to determine those. We would enter into a memorandum of understanding. We would follow a similar process that we do, but it would be done separately from our community campaign. It would still be supported by our Community Impact Committee, but we would bring the recommendation back to you as a council. There would be a fee that would go to the United Way of Wayne County, but that recommendation would come back to you to make the decision, and then you would be able to provide those details with your finance director, and your finance department would issue checks to those nonprofits. So the big difference between these two, looking at this, option A, all of the process, the fiscal accountability is directed to United Way of Wayne County with our identified 4 focus areas. With option B, and city support, the process is supported by us, but the fiscal accountability is directed to the city of Goldsboro, and we're looking at the focus areas that you desire to support. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can. And of course, this is just kind of the start of a conversation. This could be challenged or improved upon. However you all think, if there is a way that we can help to support each other, we're happy to do that.
Anyone have any questions?
We will decide this at budget time, won't we?
Yes, yes.
How we're going to do our nonprofits.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I don't know, can we pull up that slide?
Which one?
I've got one that I created, just so council understands a little bit more about
Sure.
the programs we fund. Thank you, Sherry. We still may need you to answer a few questions, but
Ms. Sherry, while they're pulling up that slide, do you still offer the incentive for city employees to contribute a certain amount to raffle for a free day off and all that?
So that actually isn't done through United Way.
Okay.
The city of Goldsboro would offer those incentives. Employers do it in many different ways, and so I don't think the city of Goldsboro has done to that degree in quite some time.
Oh, okay.
But it's just up to the major investor that's doing that. Sometimes they'll have a table full of different incentives that they're offering to employers. Sometimes they have a day off or it's a vacation day. Sometimes it's wear your jeans day. I mean, all kinds of different incentives that get kind of creative with major investors. But that's up to that major investor.
Okay.
we do offer the program.
Okay.
People can fund the program.
Fund it.
Sherry, how much did we, do you know the city specific amount that was donated last year?
Yes, this past year was just under 10,000.
One of the things I like about the program is that Sherry's organization, through their investment committee, takes on responsibility of vetting all of the organizations that get money. And they have a pretty intensive vetting process, I understand.
Another thing it does, I'll say this, it takes the pressure off of us as a council.
Yeah.
And
And
the manager, taking a look at all
That's
these
true.
things. So you've got 15 programs here that the city funded last year, and that it came up to $160,900. And Councilwoman Matthews mentioned that, hey, why do we just fund these ones that we have in the past? Why can't we take more, whoever wants to apply? And we can do that, but the ability to vet all these nonprofits and to take in their audits, if you will, and there's a lot of work behind all that Sherry's organization does. And so my thought, and I talked to the mayor about it and others, is it's possible that we could give a certain amount of money to United Way of Wayne County and let them make those decisions. Now, if you take a look at all these nonprofits, many of them fall within what Sherry's organization does in option A that she mentioned, but a couple of them would not, i.e. the museum or the Arts Council. Those are things that you might want to fund separately if you agree that they are worth doing for community arts purposes.
And I promise you're gonna get phone calls. Every
Yeah,
year
I
we
mean-
get phone calls. If you leave somebody off or you don't give them what they want or what they request, then
So I'm sure many of these organizations get money from United Way already, and they could better determine some of that. So we just need a way ahead, potentially, maybe, if you can think about it, whether you want to make a decision on tomorrow afternoon, or, otherwise I just go through the budget process, see what we get, and probably allot that same amount of money, but I can't pick winners and losers in this nonprofit organization. You all are going to have to do that, and then there's obviously concerns with that. Thank you.
So my concern is, because I really advocated for this last year, we oftentimes see funding go to the same organizations. We have some nonprofits within our city who are boots on the ground. They are in the trenches. They don't have the opportunity to have these lavish brick and mortar buildings, so oftentimes they're not on the scope of United Way. They're not on the scope of other organizations who have money to fund them. And I know one particular organization who reached out to me the other day who was so excited that Ms. Gwen called her to let her know that the application process was going to be opening soon. I think that out of all the times the city say this is how we've always done it, this is one of those times where we need to maintain the control of who we fund, and we really need to look at, because I said it last year, some of these organizations I think we should reconsider in terms of funding, or at least the dollar amount in which we fund them. But I really want us to focus on some of our community members who are really in the trenches working hard to help support our residents who are not on the scope of a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA or a Wayne Pregnancy Center. They're just not there yet, but they need the financial support and backing of the city. And I think that that's something that we need to strongly consider. While the United Way and their system may work, and I'm not rebuttaling against that or the effectiveness of it, but I want us to strongly consider the power that we have if we keep the ball in our court to really support our residents who are in the trenches. And that's not to say the Boys Club isn't. I used to work there, I volunteered there, got roots at the Boys and Girls Club, but I do know that there are organizations who are doing it. I reached out to somebody today because I saw that it was on the website. So for those nonprofits, it's on the website now, and I encourage everybody, and we should want to take the time to vet them. It gives us the opportunity to know who's in our own community and who we could possibly partner with. So let's not try to cut corners or find easier ways to do it. Let's work on, you know, meaningful relationships with those people and those nonprofits who are doing it. So I really hope that we consider that before we just automatically try to put it in somebody else's hands to do the work for us that I think we should be doing. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Let me share that.
Okay, Sherry, thank you so much for coming. Next on the agenda is SB 473, and requested this be put on there because of a recent Senate Bill 473 that was passed that deals with us as council members being on boards and or voting for monies for those boards. So there are some new restrictions that are being imposed on us, and our attorney, Ron Lawrence, is going to cover that.
Thanks, sir. Questions?
Octavius, thank you for passing those out for me. What I've done is I put together a little more in the packet than what I'm going to discuss, and that was just to give you some background and a reminder on sort of the statutes that talk about a conflict of interest in participating in contracts in general. So the packet of information I gave to you includes 14-234 in each of its subparts as well, and the new statutes that are sort of appended to that, which would be 14-234.2 as well as .3. .1 already existed. That's in your packet just to make it sort of complete. Then at the end, I gave you the bulletin that was published in December from Christina Wilson with the School of Government for Coach Cannons, which sort of breaks down the statute a little bit as well for your reference after we talk about it today. But specifically, just getting to the point of the mayor, you know, one of the big things that we discuss on a frequent basis, or I say we, y'all discuss on a frequent basis, is DGDC and money going to DGDC or some sort of like nonprofit organization. And so what this new statute says is essentially that no public official shall knowingly participate in making or administering a contract, including the award of money in the form of a grant, loan, or other appropriation with any nonprofit with which that public official is associated. The public official shall record his or her recusal with the clerk to the board, and once recorded, the political subdivision of the state may enter into or administer the contract. And so, you know, a couple of issues that came up were, okay, how about if the person is an ex officio member? That means non-voting, not making a decision on a nonprofit's board that the city is going to contract with. If they are an ex officio, our opinion is that's not an issue for them to participate because they have no voting or decision-making authority with regards to that particular nonprofit's concern. If you're not ex officio, but you are one that can vote and participate in the voting on the nonprofit, then the opinion is you cannot participate. You must recuse yourself. You know, this is one of those exceptions to the general rules that require you to vote. You know, the rules that require council members to vote are very tough and tight, saying you must vote and shall vote unless one of these exceptions apply. So this is a new exception that applies. And then the question came up, well, how about a budgetary issue? Let's say you don't contract. Again, you know, if the city doesn't contract with, for instance, the DGDC for services, then, but if they were to appropriate monies to the DGDC, the question is, well, now what does that council member do? Or how does the city handle that? Well, how about if you have an appropriations to the DGDC, for example? I keep using that as an example because it's easy. We all know about that. Not saying that's the only one. But if there's an appropriation line in the budget, and you're going to vote on the entire budget, well, that could be a problem, even if there's not going to be a contract with the DGDC. So in that circumstance, you would want to take that appropriations and not put it in the general budget, but then have a budget ordinance at some point later when you're going to actually do the appropriation voted upon. You could do it then, but that council member at that point would need to recuse themselves from participation.
So, Mr. Lawrence, in the light of the conversation we just had about possibly using United Way to vet these organizations and fund the organizations, would that allow council members a little bit of separation?
The issue then is, are you on the board of the United Way? Okay, so if you're on the board of United Way, then you're going to have the same rules apply to you. If you're not on the board, then it's not an issue.
But all of the receiving organizations, at that point, then we could be on boards of those receiving organizations because we don't have a role in if they're going to get funded or not.
That's correct, because it's an indirect, because United Way makes that final decision on where those funds are going to go or not going to go. That's correct.
In a way, doesn't that just say that we can't serve on these boards?
Well, no, it's not saying you can't serve on them. It's just saying you can't vote when it's time to give them some money.
Okay.
I mean, essentially. But you could serve, in my opinion, as an ex officio member, non-voting, non-rulemaking authority on those boards.
Because there's a county representative and there's a city representative on the wages board.
Well, wages is something that the city gives money to as an appropriation, because we don't contract with wages for any services, correct? And I'm not the finance director, but I don't think that we do. So then if you're giving money directly to wages and it's appropriated to wages in the budget, it's going to need to be taken out of the general budget if you want to vote on the general budget. If that city council member is not ex officio but does have voting power and decision-making authority like other board members on wages, then you will need to, again, take that out of the general budget, have a separate budget ordinance that would be passed where you would need to recuse yourself from voting on that. Okay? So just thank the legislature for more complicated issues. You can see the reason behind it, just to make sure there's not some favoritism or some sort of great benefits. But, you know, again, we're talking about nonprofits where typically that is not the case anyway. But obviously there was concern that was raised, and the necessity to pass a new statute to limit that, you know, was recognized by at least a number of people to make it so they felt like it was necessary. Any more questions?
Mr. Broadway, are you a ex officio non-voting, or are you a voting member?
We've always had somebody on the board.
Voting?
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, since we give them money.
I think my term's almost over anyway, but I'm asking that.
I think the city will just need to take a look at any of those nonprofits that one of you folks, council members, sits on their board and has, you know, decision-making authority on that board. Then you're going to need to make sure, and we're going to need to make sure that you don't vote or participate in those processes.
So Laura has asked for that information from council members. If you could, if you've gotten it to her, great. If not, please do.
And then you'll need to make sure that's forwarded to Catherine so that the proper budget ordinances later can be taken care of to appropriate the funds, and then you can recuse yourself from that specific vote for that particular ordinance.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we should actually, if you don't mind, Mr. Hager, I'd like to ask that question out loud, because you also have the other state boards and commissions that the city could be a party to a transaction that, like the Ash Street Corridor, where that will be part of the funding for that will come from the city. And that's a Transportation Advisory Council, you know, thing. Does that apply to the state boards and commissions, or is it just private nonprofit?
My opinion on that is that it's not if it's a state-created
Right.
nonprofit.
How about Gateway?
Is that considered a nonprofit?
I don't know.
I don't know anything about the GWT. I've never had any participation in that since they have their own separate attorney. Borden Parker is their attorney, who represents their interest.
We'll have to look into it.
Okay. All right, before we go to the last item on the agenda for today, let me just say that this has to do with economic development plan. And for those council members and other members of the public or staff, remember, back in 2018, I brought to the attention of the city what I felt was a need for us to have an economic development study, and had 2 presentations to the council. The council at that time approved the concept of us preparing an economic development study and set a timeline for that. But in the following year for the budget, there was some monies appropriated, but not enough money to go forward with that plan. Since that time, there have been more discussions and more opportunities for us to hear about the fact that Goldsboro is one of those cities that does not have an economic development plan, and the impact of that, the negative impact of that, quite frankly, in terms of our growth and so forth. An economic development plan is not a cheap item, as I've said before. So we haven't funded, and nor have I asked the council for funding for that since then. But we are, quite frankly, sort of underway in of doing that. And we have here today a couple people from the North Carolina Department of Commerce who's going to talk to us about an economic development assessment plan. And let me this time ask Ms. Amy Suggs and Lee Patrick come forward, please, and give us some information about this program. And thank you all for coming down.
Thank you for having us. I am Amy Suggs, and I am with the North Carolina Department of Commerce in the Rural Economic Development
Ma'am?
Division.
Ma'am, if you could take the
yes.
mask off while
Oh,
you're speaking, that might
sure.
help.
Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
And I am located in the Southeast Prosperity Zone, and then also have with me Lee Patrick, who is in the Northeast Prosperity Zone and does, borders Wayne County with his counties. But we're also the Main Street Rural Planning Program. We're in rural planning, and we go out to rural communities and help them with economic development. And so that's why we're here to talk to you today about the Community Economic Development Assessment Plan. So the CDAP, instead of the acronym, is a short-term efficient assessment that to jumpstart your economic development efforts by providing a plan that has action items, and these action items have tasks, people assigned to them, so that, and the goal is to have tangible economic development activities that come from these strategies and these action items. So, examples of impacts from this plan, we're going to have a plan, create a plan that we can measure by economic investment, both public and private, in Goldsboro, citywide. Jobs created in the city and jobs retained, because it's great to create jobs, but you also need to retain the jobs that you do. New businesses recruited and started in new or expansion to existing economic development programs or initiatives. So in our planning process, we will provide a final report In this final report, we will have an economic snapshot that shows where you're at when we start the plan, results of activities discussed during the assessment meetings, which we'll go over. In the assessment meetings, we'll do asset identification. We'll go over your economic drivers, and we'll also do a SWOT analysis. We will also do stakeholder interviews with the citizens of Goldsboro. We'll have a questionnaire for them to answer so they can have some input as well. We'll come out with an economic positioning statement and a vision for economic development for Goldsboro, and we will have an implementation plan, which I'll show you on the next slide. And you, as a city, will build upon this CDAP to formulate and achieve additional goals in future years. So to accomplish this CDAP, there will be a work group established, and of about 10, 12 people is what we recommend. And this work group will give the input that helps us formulate a plan. It's a 6-hour commitment. We do it back-to-back days. We find that works really well. Maybe 4 hours one day and a couple hours the next day to wrap up. It's reflective of the community. Need a diverse group of people. For example, but it's not limited to, in your work group, economic development organizations, faith-based leaders, small business leaders, chamber, city infrastructure and planning, military, elected official, education, healthcare, nonprofit sector. That's who we find a lot of times our work groups are compiled of. So this is an example of, and I know it's hard, well, not too hard to read, one that was done in Pine Tops. So you can see this is a final plan. This is the first of a couple pages, but has the economic positioning statement and has strategic goals that surfaced during these meetings. And then in the yellow, you can see there are objectives, specific objectives to help meet that goal, and then there are action items underneath that help obtain that objective. So our proposal is that I believe you have in front of you a little bit about the assessment, also an MOU and a resolution. This is a service that we would provide at no charge to the city of Goldsboro. It talks about our responsibilities to you, your responsibilities as a city to participate, and a resolution to move forward. So do y'all have any questions, any thoughts? Lee, is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I can't come all this way without talking, so thank you. I'm Lee Pedrick, and I'm Amy's assistant in this project. I'm her northeast counterpart. I've got 16 counties in the northeast corner of the state. I've worked with my other colleagues on this type of CDAP, or the assessment process, the 2-day assessment process, in the town of Nashville, which is obviously smaller than Goldsboro, and Wendell, which obviously smaller, but has a lot of the same growth issues that you guys have here as well. It really depends on the group you give us to work with, but as Amy showed you in the Pine Tops example, we want to come out of here with 3 to 5 strategic goal areas, come up with some ideas of what you'd like to get accomplished under those goal areas. And as the mayor was talking about, this has been going on since 2018, one of those things may be a full-fledged strategic plan, but our expertise is concentrated on the economic development portion of it. However, we can potentially foresee that out of that assessment, the community may want to pursue a full, comprehensive strategic planning effort. But anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you, looking forward to working with this project with you guys. I grew up in LaGrange. My dad retired from Seymour Johnson, so I almost feel like I'm back home. So I'm looking forward to coming and working with you guys. Thank you. Any questions?
Let me make sure that, well, let me just say this. As you just said, this is not a full comprehensive economic study. I understand that. But it is an opportunity for us to look at certain areas that are as a part of an overall economic development study. And whereas a full comprehensive plan would cost about $200,000, this one is a little less than $2,000.
Well, we're not going to, Mr. Mayor, we're not going to charge you. We haven't charged since the beginning of the pandemic, and we haven't been told otherwise. So, and we're going to do this in a few weeks if you guys want to move forward. So let's just go with the assumption that there's going to be no charge to the city.
Okay. I'll take that. So as Ms. Suggs said, we have before you a resolution that is required if we want to pursue this. And if you want to talk about it today, we can. If you want to do it tomorrow at the close or wait till March, we can do it. But in order to proceed, we have to agree to it in a resolution. And so I would, I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at it, at the resolution that you have before you or not, but if you have, and you want to take a moment this time to discuss it and act on it, we can. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the resolution as stated and so we can approve it?
Certainly.
Motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the resolution as submitted, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, we'll have the resolution assigned for you and we'll get to work.
Great. We look forward, Leslie said, we look forward to working with you guys.
Good. Same here. Thank you. Thanks for coming down.
The only thing left, and I don't know if you want to do this, Aaron, at this meeting or not, was to give it to appoint the group that we're going to work with. We got some potential dates picked out, but I don't know how we want to move forward as far as that group.
That was the responsibility of the mayor to determine based on
Okay.
the list that you gave.
Okay.
They're going to be on there. I think he's already working on that group.
Yeah, there have, some names have been proposed. I haven't seen the full list, so I can't comment to you where they, at this point, where they are. But we'll look forward to you coming back to see us.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I believe that is the final item on the agenda. At this time, I'll open the floor up to any general discussion that anyone might have about anything that we've talked about or people have talked to us about.
Mayor, I might have a question.
Sir, you want to be excused? Okay, thank you. So before we leave out of here, let me remind the council the ethics agreement we made with the LGC recently, that we would undertake and complete the study that Susan McCullen tasked us to do. And I believe I sent it out to email that we would all complete that by March. And if you haven't done so, please do. It's really, you can do it in about an hour's time. There are 8 modules there. 2 or 3 of them are 3 minutes long. The longest one, I believe, is 9 minutes. One is 7 minutes. One is 5 minutes. And the rest of them are 3 or 4 minutes. So if you take time to sit down and do it, you can do the whole thing in less than an hour's time. But it's something that we have agreed to do as part of the agreement with LGC. And we'll remind you, please, to find that on your email, the site, and take care of that, please. So if I have no more discussion, I'll recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.